Chapter 126. Yeting lightly snapped his fingers, and the closet door opened. A Dementor slowly floated out of the closet. Its hooded face turned towards Hermione, a rotting hand clutching its cloak. The lights around the room of requirement flickered and went out. It came out of the wardrobe and began to walk quickly and silently towards Hermione, taking a deep breath as it did so. A bone-chilling cold hit her. "Wall guard!" Hermione shouted, "Wall guard! Call guard!" The images of the room of requirement and the Dementor were disappearing, and endless memories began to echo in Hermione's mind, including the sound of wind in her ears when the broomstick fell, the terrifying roar of the troll, and the hissing and crawling of the basilisk. The sound of scales rubbing against the floor lingered in her mind. Hermione. Hermione returned to reality. She found herself sitting on the floor, asking Curry to explode again. She didn't have to wonder what had just happened. "Sorry," she whispered, sitting up, feeling tears about to flow out of her eyes. "Are you okay?" Yeting stepped forward and asked with concern. Suddenly, Hermione stood up and threw herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face. Yeting had no choice but to hold her gently, stroke her hair, and comfort her over and over again. Pinello and Zhangqiu also stepped forward to help Yeting persuade Hermione. After a while, Hermione finally stopped crying. "Eat it," Yeting handed her a piece of chocolate frog. "You can rest for a while and we will try again later. I don't expect you to be able to do it the first time. To be honest, if you succeed, I will feel surprised." "It's terrible," Hermione whispered, biting the frog's head off. "I saw myself falling on the broom, I saw the troll, I saw the basilisk." Yeting's face looked ugly, and he could only say over and over again, "Everything has passed, hasn't it? They have nothing to fear, everything has passed. I'm going to try again." Hermione whispered after finishing the chocolate frog. "Hermione, I'll understand if you don't want to continue." "I have to continue." Hermione shouted, "I have to do this. I can't always be overwhelmed by these fears. Otherwise, I will never be able to catch up with you again." Oh, she is indeed the Miss Know-It-All. Not only smart, but also strong and unwilling to admit defeat. She is indeed a strong girl. "Okay then," Yeting said, patting Hermione on the back, "you may want to choose another memory, a happy memory. I mean, change it and think about it wholeheartedly. Your memory just now seems not strong enough." "I see." Hermione nodded. "Are you ready?" Yeting asked. He let go of Hermione and walked aside. "Ready," Hermione said, trying her best to fill her mind with the fact that she was praised by the teacher in class and got full marks in the exam. "Start," Yeting said, opening the closet. The room of requirement suddenly became cold and dark again. The Dementor slithered forward, rattling and breathing, and 10 putrid hands stretched out towards Hermione. "Wall guard!" Hermione shouted, "Wall guard! Call guard!" The disgusting memories made her lose her mind again. She fell from a high altitude in despair, faced a giant monster alone, and was chased by a basilisk. "Hermione, Hermione, wake up!" Yeting shook her shoulders. This time, it took Hermione a minute to understand why she was lying in Yeting's arms. "I feel sad," Yeting said apologetically. "Listen, Hermione, maybe we should stop here today. This kind of spell is too advanced, and I don't agree to let you learn this so early." "No," said Hermione. She stood up again. "I'm going to try again. The things I'm thinking about are not happy enough, that's why I'm like this. I'm going to stick to it." She searched again. Really happy memories, memories that she could turn into a good and powerful patron saint. Countless joys brought about by her success flashed through her mind, but these were no different from the memories just now. Real happiness, real joy. If you experience real despair and pain, then isn't the opposite of these experiences real happiness? She suddenly thought of the dangers she faced. What happened to her after these crises? Why was she able to survive these dangers? She glanced at Yeting next to her, who was looking at her with concern. "Yes, it is that person who allows me to save myself from danger every time. What else can be closer to true happiness than this?" A knowing smile appeared on her lips, and Yeting was almost stunned by that beautiful smile. "Are you ready?" Yeting said, as if doing so was against his correct judgment. "Last question." Hermione turned to glance at Yeting. "You will always be by my side to protect me, right?" "That's right," if you fail, I will lock up the Dementors in time just like before. Really? Hermione smiled and nodded. She was not asking Yeting about Dementors. Yeting completely got the wrong answer. However, she seems to have gotten the answer she wanted. I'm ready. Are you trying to concentrate? Okay, let's start. He opened the closet door for the third time, and the Dementor floated out of the closet, and coldness and darkness filled the room of requirement. Desperate memories overwhelmed her again, flying broomsticks, trolls, basilisks. But this time, she was not repelled by the memories, because she thought that after every despair, there is a twists and turns, a heartwarming ending. Yes, he has protected me every time and he will always be by my side. So, what else is there to be afraid of? Mere fear, in the end, is nothing more than some thrilling but meaningful memories. Call the gods to protect you. The memories gradually faded in her mind, and the Dementor in front of her stopped, and then a silver shadow shot out from the end of Hermione's wand, hovering between her and the Dementor. Although Hermione felt that her legs it was extremely soft, but she was still standing on her own after all, although she didn't know how long she could stand. Call the gods to protect you. It was Yeting's voice. A dragon shining with silver-white light rushed forward and faced the Dementor instead of Hermione's patron saint. The dragon just bumped lightly and the Dementor was pressed into the closet unable to move. Yeting snapped his fingers and the closet door was immediately closed. Hermione felt that she could no longer hold on, her legs completely softened, and the patroness disappeared into the air. Yeting came behind her and caught Hermione, who was completely exhausted. Chapter 127. I succeeded. I succeeded. Hermione shouted excitedly in Yeting's arms. Awesome! Yeting praised loudly, awesome! Hermione, this is a very good start. I have already said that the magic spell that can stump our Hermione has not been invented yet. His hand stroked Hermione's fluffy curly hair vigorously, and Hermione also laughed silly. Zhongqiu and Pinello couldn't help but feel full admiration for her under the threat of being possessed. She collapsed twice in a row. Even so, she stood up again and finally succeeded. It was like this for a while before she regained her strength. Can we try again? Just once, okay. Hermione looked at Yeting expectantly. The success just now made her more confident. Not now, Yeting said firmly, you have suffered enough tonight. Well. He handed Hermione a large piece of chocolate. Eat it all, or Madame Pomfrey will settle the score with me. Let's practice again next time. Now we need to give Zhongqiu and Pinello some opportunities. I don't know if they were stimulated by Hermione, but Zhongqiu and Pinello practiced extra hard. Although they were frightened and collapsed by the Dementors that the boggart turned into, they still persisted time and time again. Even a girl like Zhongqiu, who is not very strong, gritted her teeth and asked for one more time uncharacteristically. Until Yeting stopped them. That's enough, ladies, that's enough. After locking the Dementors in the closet again, Yeting persuaded, your performance tonight was already great. Look, you can already face the Dementors. When it gets weird, he uses his wand to spray out silver smoke, which is more than most people can do. You know, even the savior Harry Potter fainted when facing the Dementors. As soon as Yeting mentioned Harry, the girls' laughter echoed in the room, and the atmosphere suddenly became relaxed. Yes, even the saviors are afraid of Dementors, aren't they? But you have been able to actively face the Dementors and use the Patroness spell in front of it, although it is still just some smoke, but this is already a very big deal. Big breakthrough. That's because you are here to protect us. Pinello interjected, and both Zhongqiu and Hermione nodded. Yes, but that doesn't cover up your courage, does it? Yeting encouraged them with a smile. They say Gryffindor is the embodiment of courage, but today you are much braver than they show, aren't you? At least I haven't heard of anyone in Gryffindor being able to recite the Patroness charm in front of the Dementors, not even those who can spit out some airflow. Listening to Yeting's words, the girls couldn't help but blush. So, Yeting concluded, in fact, everyone has gained a lot today. Hermione has been able to summon an almost complete Patroness. After one or two more times, she should be able to summon the physical Patroness skillfully. Chu and Pinello is also very good, so being able to make the Patroness charm take effect while facing Dementors, although it is only the most basic, is only one step away from the physical Patroness. I guess I will practice it next time or the next time. It can be completed within 10 minutes. Girls, you have performed quite well, This is something that many adult witches cannot do, so what are you still dissatisfied with? Finally, the girls gave up further practice under his persuasion, but as soon as they relaxed, their mental and physical exhaustion immediately paralyzed them. So Yeting and Hermione, who had recovered a little, helped each other and sent them back to the dormitory. It's breakfast time again. Starting today, the 3rd grade necromancers will start their new courses, some elective courses they have never learned before, such as Muggle studies, care of magical creatures, divination, and mathematics. Divination, research on ancient magic texts, etc. Students usually choose 1 or 2 elective courses, but Yeting noticed that Hermione actually chose all the elective courses. You got that one, right? Yeting asked Hermione seriously. What are you talking about? Hermione looked confused. I'm talking about the time turner. Yeting said angrily, look, they have scheduled 10 classes for you in one day. Did you see the one this morning? 9 o'clock, divination below, at 9 o'clock, Muggle studies, A&D. Yeting got closer to the class schedule and couldn't believe it. Look, below is arithmetic divination, 9 o'clock. Apart from applying for a time converter from the professor, I can't think of how you can do this. It's the beginning of school. You got it, right? 0, please give me flowers. He also remembered that Hermione had left with Professor Flitwick for a short while. Time-related magic is unstable, and serious violations of the time code can have disastrous consequences. Therefore, the Ministry of Magic conducts strict warranty checks before approving the use of time turners. In order for Hermione to possess a time turner, Professor Flitwick had to apply for special approval from the Ministry of Magic, and Hermione's excellent grades ensured that she was approved. You actually know this? Hermione was a little surprised. You won't tell anyone? I promised Professor Flitwick not to tell anyone about this. The time turner is really too dangerous for you. Yeting advised in a deep voice, when you use the time turner, your mental fatigue will not disappear. If you do this all day long, sooner or later you will be overstressed. Big collapse. Hermione opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. She felt that Yeting's words were a bit too serious. Professor Flitwick had told her how to use the time turner correctly last semester and she felt that she could handle everything. She opened her mouth, and finally just uttered one sentence, you will keep it a secret, right? Okay, Yeting shrugged, I will definitely not tell anyone, but if you can't hold on any longer, or if you run into any trouble when using the time turner, you can come to me. Thank you, Hermione nodded happily. When she realized that no one was paying attention to them, she slapped Yeting on the face and walked away immediately. Looking at Hermione's retreating back, Yeting shook her head helplessly. She really didn't know how high the sky was. You know, the paradox of time would exist in any world. For these time travelers, just learning or collecting information through time travel has no impact, but if they try to change history, then since history is unique, these people who change history have only 2 endings, either the change has become part of history, which is not bad, but it is more likely that those who tried to make history disappeared due to some accidents before they had any impact. Chapter 128. In fact, Yeting also did some research on magic that could travel through time, but he soon gave up because such magic was actually quite useless. In fact, any behavior that travels through time will eventually become part of history, because the single-line history is the basic rule that constitutes the world. Within the world, there is no way to break through this rule. Forcibly doing so will only cause could be the collapse of the world. However, there is indeed a way around all this, and that is to start from outside the world. Based on Yeting's continuous research on time and space, combined with his experience in the space-time tunnel, Yeting came to a conclusion, that is, the timelines of different worlds are completely out of sync. The time and space tunnel is a Wang-Yang sea that transcends all worlds. There is no concept of time and space, and all worlds float and sink in this sea. Within the world, time is one way, history is established, and all 750 are constantly moving toward the future. But in the space-time tunnel. Or what can be called the Sea of Chaos. The entire history of all worlds is completed, observable and influenceable. In other words, in the Sea of Chaos, the entire time and space of the world is like a finished video. Viewers can choose any frame to start browsing the video, and can choose to speed up, slow down, play in reverse, etc., and even play back the video. Modification and editing are not impossible, if such viewers really exist. With Yeting's ability, although he cannot be such a viewer, he can select any frame of the video in the Sea of Chaos to enter that world, resulting in the entire video being completely different from the original. However, even so, Yeting cannot change the history of Harry Potter's world, because Yeting originally had his personal history. Every individual has his or her own personal history, and for those who have the ability to enter the Sea of Chaos and travel across the world, personal history is the shackles on them, restricting them and preventing them from doing whatever they want. Just as within the world, the history of the world is a given, for these travelers, no, for any individual, their original history cannot be taught. Every time they enter a world, this world will be connected with their personal history. And even time travelers cannot change their own history. In other words, for every world they travel to, the time point they choose when traveling is particularly important, because everything in the future of this world after this time point is a time travel. The traveler's original future needs to be created by himself, and the history before this point in time can no longer be changed by the traveler, because changing the history of this world is changing his own history, and the ending will either change and become history, part of it is either destroyed before causing change, making it impossible for change to occur. Another question is, how many beings have the ability to enter the Sea of Chaos? Perhaps, before Yeting, there was none. In other words, even if there are many powerful people who have broken through the world and successfully entered the Sea of Chaos, none of them will be able to successfully enter other worlds. Because, basically, there is no way in or out of the Sea of Chaos. The illogical turbulence of time and space cannot be resisted no matter what, and the only way to get involved is to be destroyed. Whether it is a god or a demon king, whether a warrior or a magician, there are no exceptions, except for Yeting, a unique ordinary person. Having said so much, it is actually because Yeting has already started research on time and space travel. Although the progress is not very fast, due to Yeting's wisdom and his ability to understand time and space, he is certain that results will definitely appear within a year. In the current Hogwarts, there are not many courses that interest Yeting, but out of respect for the professors and in order to enjoy the fun of being a student, Yehui follows other young necromancers into the classroom. But his respect only ends there. In most classes, he does not take into account the professor's content and focuses on his own research and learning. The professors are also happy to do this. After all, he makes a person whose level is no less than his own. Listening to one's own class is also quite stressful. If anything goes wrong, it will be oneself who makes a fool of himself. Yeting has little interest in most of the elective courses this semester. Divination and arithmetic are of no use to him, because for a time traveler like him, all futures deviate from the established timeline, so precognition is basically equivalent to true vision. Blind, in his eyes, Muggle studies is just about the necromancer's ridiculous prejudice against Muggles. Only ancient runes and protecting magical creatures are of some interest in his eyes. The former is because Professor Bathita Babuling is indeed a rare master of ancient runes. In this regard, Yeting can have certain exchanges with her, the latter is purely out of interest. As a lover of dangerous creatures, Hagrid can indeed let him see some interesting magical creatures. However, the divination class that Yeting disliked did bring him some fun. In Professor McGonagall's shape-shifting class, Professor McGonagall was teaching them about the animagus, and when talking about the history of the animagus, she proudly mentioned that his student, Yeting, became the animagus, the first magical creature in history. Then, in full view of the public, she transformed into a tabby cat with traces of glasses around her eyes. However, the little necromancers responded very little, which made her very dissatisfied. "Seriously, what happened to you today?" Professor McGonagall said, accompanied by a slight pop. She had returned to her original shape and looked around at the students. "It doesn't matter, but my shape-shifting didn't win applause from the whole class. This is the first time." Everyone's heads turned to Harry again, but no one spoke. Then Hermione raised her hand. "Professor, we just had a divination class, we read tea leaves, and." "Ah, definitely," said Professor McGonagall, suddenly frowning, "there is no need to say any more, Miss Granger. Tell me, who among you will die this year?" Everyone stared at her. "Me," Harry finally said. "Understood," Professor McGonagall said, staring at Harry with her small round eyes. "Well, Potter, you should know that Westbill Trelawney has predicted a student every year since she came to this school. Death. So far none of them has died." There was a sneer from the audience. "Oh, Mr. Yet, I just talked about you." Professor McGonagall looked at Yeting, who was laughing, and asked gently, it seems that you are somewhat opposed to the 1.5 opinion, so what do you have in mind? I think Professor Trelawney's prediction is quite accurate. Yeting's words caused an uproar. Hermione looked at him in shock, because just an hour ago, Yeting told her that he did not choose divination class because of he feels that the future is completely unpredictable and that his future will be created by himself, but now. However, Yeting's next words made her laugh. As we all know, people will always die, either today or tomorrow, maybe when you are old. However, as long as people will die, then Professor Trelawney's prediction is accurate, isn't it? The class burst into laughter. Professor McGonagall also laughed, and then she said to Harry with a very matter-of-fact emphasis, I see that you are in extremely good health, Potter, so don't blame me if I don't let you off lightly with your homework today. I promise, if you die, you won't have to hand in this assignment. Chapter 129. The afternoon care of magical creatures lesson was Hagrid's first lesson, which was about understanding hippogriffs. The name of this animal is very long and sounds strange, but in fact, their life experience is very simple. They are the offspring of a male griffin and a female horse. Their heads, wings, and front legs are like griffins, but their hind bodies are like horses. Such a cross is very difficult, because griffins have always despised horses and feed on them, which makes their existence extremely rare. After all, not everyone can mate with their own food. In the Middle Ages, there was a Muggle proverb, matching a griffin and a horse, which means something impossible. In addition, this creature has another short name, hippogriff. According to legend, Astolfo, one of the 12 warriors of Charles, obtained the hippogriff from the magician. Yeting was very interested in this proud creature. Hagrid brought 12 hippogriffs and told them that if they want to get close to a hippogriff, the first step is to bow, and at the same time they must maintain eye contact with him. If he bows back to you, you can pet him or even ride him. Harry was the first to step forward and salute the hippogriffs, and successfully mounted one of them, which earned him a round of cheers from Gryffindor. Yeting also stepped forward, but before he could make any move, these hippogriffs fell to the ground in front of him. Now Yeting has become proficient in using some of Dragon's skills. Ability, for example, Long Way. As soon as the dragon's power came out, these ordinary magical creatures seemed to be targeted by natural enemies, and they did not even dare to move. So, under such circumstances, Yeting successfully rode one hippogriff around, and also forced the other hippogriff to carry Hermione around. This strange scene made Hagrid panic. Surprised, even he had never made them so docile. Perhaps deceived by Yeting's example, the young necromancers obviously underestimated the danger of the hippogriff. But most people, except Malfoy, strictly followed Hagrid's requirements to get along with these animals based on their respect for the professor. This little snake neither looked down upon the half-blood giant Hagrid nor the muggle-born Hermione and Yeting. Even though they both crushed Malfoy in magic. And at the same time, he also looked down upon Harry. Potter was the sworn enemy. In other words, in the class of the person he despises, his mortal enemy and 2 other muggles he despises can actually ride such a beast, so why can't he, who is of noble blood, not be able to do it? Then, the accident happened. Stupid Malfoy actually insulted this XXX level magical creature. Aren't you in danger, you ugly piece of shit? The next second, the steel grey claw waved. Malfoy let out a scream and huddled up on the grass. There were blood stains on the robe. Yeting shook his head helplessly. He would not die unless he wanted to die. However, Hagrid and the hippogriff also had to face a not-so-good fate. After all, with the arrogance of the necromancers, any magical creature that dares to harm the necromancer must be punished. Just look at the exaggerated fountain statue in the Ministry of Magic, especially since Malfoy's father is a powerful pure-blood necromancer. However, Yeting can't do anything at the moment. After all, Hagrid was originally a little careless. He liked those dangerous magical creatures so much that he regarded the little necromancers as the same people as himself. Compared to Hagrid's failure, another new teacher, Black Magic Defense Professor Remus Lupin, was much more successful. In fact, the first impressions of the little necromancers on him were not very good. During the first class, everyone noticed that Professor Lu Ping's clothes were patched and the suitcase he carried was in tatters. Because of this outfit, some young necromancers, especially Slytherin students, began to look at him with contempt. In Yeting's opinion, the new professor's appearance was actually pretty good, if only he didn't have the thick layer of aging lines on his forehead and the messy beard on his cheeks. However, for a werewolf who is not welcome anywhere and has to struggle for survival every day for food and clothing, these are undoubtedly extravagant wishes. Good afternoon, he said, please put all your books back in your bag. Today is a practical lesson, and all you need is your wand. The whole class was confused, but also interested. They all stood up and followed Professor Lupin out of the classroom. He led them down the deserted corridor and turned a corner. There, the first thing they saw was the prankster Peeves, floating head down in the air, and stuffing gum into the keyhole closest to him. It wasn't until Professor Lupin was 2 feet away from Peeves that he looked up, then he wriggled his toes curled up and sang, "Stupid, confused Lupin," sang Peeves, "Stupid, confused Lupin, stupid, confused Lupin." Peeves is always rude and difficult to manage, but he usually has some respect for teachers. It seems that Lupin had some grudges with Peeves when they were at school. Everyone quickly turned their attention to the professor to see how he was doing it. To their surprise, he was still smiling. "If I were you, Peeves, I would take the gum out of the keyhole," said Lupin cheerfully. "Mr. Filch can't go in and get the broom." However, Peeves ignored Professor Lupin's words and simply blew out a wet raspberry loudly. Professor Lupin sighed slightly and took out his wand. "This is a useful little mantra," he turned back to the class and said, "Please take a look at it." He raised his wand and pointed it at Peeves 510 and said, "Wadi Waisai." The small piece of chewing gum shot out of the keyhole like a bullet, and shot directly into Peeves' left nostril. Peeves immediately turned away sharply, and rose steeply, cursing all the way. This skill won the admiration and praise of all students, and everyone felt that he was a real professor. Poor Peeves was just used as a stepping stone to gain popularity by Lupin. It only took a few days for Professor Lupin to conquer almost all the students in the school. He is very knowledgeable, his lectures are very interesting, and he is very responsible for every classmate. Definitely, and more importantly, he relies on former defense against the dark arts teachers like Lockhart and Quirrell to set him off. Compared with these predecessors, at least he is the most genuine one. After all, he was a member of the 4 Predators together with James Potter, Sirius Black, and the others, and they were a famous campus. Yeting heard such comments more than once. "Professor Liu Ping is the most outstanding black magic defense teacher I have ever seen. I just wonder if they will continue to say this when they learn that Lupin is actually a werewolf?" The picture shows the real hippogriff = W. Chapter 130. In Yeting's black magic defense practice class for 3 girls every weekend, as they study for several consecutive weeks, the girls become more and more proficient in mastering the patroness charm. However, Yeting would occasionally remind them that they were summoning the patron saint in a brightly lit room, and they were only facing fake dementors, and it might be difficult to face real dementors. "We'll be bigger." "Gee, you've said it so many times," Kai-Hu Chang said cheerfully during the first class in October. She was looking at her silver swan-shaped guardian angel flying around the room of requirement. "It's so beautiful." "Ah, yes," Yeting responded casually, "and the shape of the patron saint generally represents what kind of animal your animagus will be. But when I develop the method of dragon-like animagus, after that, your patron saint should become dragon." "Oh, dragon patroness, it's really exciting." Zhang Chu once again used her swan to drive the Boggart Dementor back to the closet. "What will it be like?" "It will be the same as your animagus." "Is it beautiful?" "There are many types of dragons." Yeting cast a spell on the Boggart Dementor to prevent it from languishing after being expelled too many times by the patron saint, and then explained, "You will probably become the same as yourself." The most similar dragons, in fact, there are many beautiful dragons such as silver dragons, emerald dragons, sapphire dragons, rainbow dragons, and so on. The next person to practice was Pinello. A beautiful silver-white flying eagle appeared from the tip of her wand, driving the dementors everywhere again. "Oh, it's hard to imagine that I can actually summon a physical guardian angel," she said excitedly. "My friends are all envious of me, because summoning a physical guardian angel is so difficult. I heard, those necromancers who can summon physical patronuses are often promoted to high-level officials in the Wiesengamot and the Ministry of Magic. I guess if I can summon this beautiful little guy in the NEWT exam, they will definitely give me points. Divide or something." "Ah, I really envy you, Pinello," Hermione said with a smile. "Your patroness is the symbol of Ravenclaw. You are a true Ravenclaw." Her patroness is a shiny silver otter, hopping around her. "But my patroness is pretty good looking, right?" Hermione said, looking at it happily. In fact, she looked a little haggard. Obviously she had been exhausted recently. After successfully summoning the physical guardian angel, the girls unanimously believed that Yeting's teachings were effective and that Yeting, as a teacher, contributed greatly to their current level. They felt that this class every weekend could carry more tasks. Yeting can teach them some more advanced spells. In fact, Yeting himself was a little moved by this proposal. The current magical world poses no challenge to him at all. Even if the Dark Lord is resurrected, he can only be said to be able to fight against him who can transform into an animagus and become a dragon. Yeting had a sudden thought. In the original book, Dumbledore trained the trio of saviors and defeated the Dark Lord. Now why doesn't he train the three of them to do this like Dumbledore? This can be considered a good idea. It's a challenge, and judging from their recent efforts and results, they can definitely achieve this. However, in this case, it was necessary for him to strengthen their combat effectiveness. Although their level now has no rivals among their peers, they are a bit inferior compared to the Death Eaters, especially when facing Antonin Dolohov and Bellatrix Lestrange. While waiting for the Death Eater elite, especially Hermione, she is very capable in combat. Yeting even believes that among the necromancers in the original book, if you don't count the cheating Harry, then Hermione is the most powerful one. But her level still needs to be improved. Yeting has already planned to train her hard every weekend to exhaust her. If she uses the time turner at this time, sooner or later she will collapse from exhaustion. Then she will be able to realize the reality and abandon that unreliable magic prop early, killing two birds with one stone. As for how to mobilize their enthusiasm, there is one ready-made bait, which is the International Necromancer Duel competition in July next year. By that time Yeting should have already become a researcher in time and space travel magic, and can open the space door. That is to say, the experiment of the dragon animagus was about to be completed at that time. Anyway, according to his theory of time and space branching into the Sea of Chaos, the timelines between different worlds are independent of each other, which means when will he cross as for when it will be returned, he will have enough time to conduct research. By then, with the dueling skills taught by Yeting and the buff of becoming a dragon like animagus, Hermione's level might be able to win the duel competition in one fell swoop. This can be regarded as training future assistants. After making the plan, Yeting mentioned the idea to the girls, and they immediately became interested. "Aren't you going to participate?" Hermione pointed out this point doubtfully. "If you are willing to participate in the duel competition, the championship should be yours, right? I still remember the duel between you and Professor Snape last year. It was quite good." "Wonderful. Although it's not too modest to say this, I want to say, yes." Yeting raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "The gap between me and ordinary necromancers is too big. I can crush them with just magic power. But the problem is not here. I have received enough honors, and I don't like to show off, but you are different." Yeting looked at the girls seriously. "Don't you want to be the focus of the crowd? Don't you want to make everyone envious and jealous? Listen, girls, judging from your performance in the past few weeks, you are like this ability, why don't you give it a try? Wouldn't it be nice to let everyone be shocked by you?" "But," Zhangqiu asked a little unconfidently, "what if we screw up? After all, there are so many powerful adult necromancers in the duel competition." "So what?" Yeting asked loudly. "It doesn't matter even if we mess up, we are still young, aren't we? When you are young, you should work hard and see what you can do. Don't be crazy at this time. When will you go crazy? Besides, I am still here to help you." "That's right." Hermione became excited and said seriously, "I have decided that I want to participate in this duel. The championship must be mine." Looking at the high-spirited Hermione in front of him, Zhangqiu hesitated for a while, then raised his hand and said loudly, I also want, the kings, to participate, and I will work hard." Pinello looked at the two schoolgirls, smiled and shook his head. "I still won't participate. I have to spend time preparing for the NEWT exam this semester, but you can teach me more high-level alchemy. Don't you want to open an alchemy shop in Diagon Alley to sell your failed experiments? How about leaving this matter to me after I graduate?" Seeing that the three girls in front of him had chosen their goals, Yeting nodded with satisfaction. The three of them are all hard-working people, and this is the most important thing. After all, he will travel between MO and MO in the future, and only those who are good enough or work hard enough can accompany him to go further, right? As for whether the three girls were willing to accompany him, Tu Ting completely ignored this point. However, judging from the current situation, he is not too confident in doing so. The picture shows Zhangqiu, my settings. Chapter 131. With the arrival of October, the new season of Quidditch Cup is also coming. In this semester, the captain of the Gryffindor team, Oliver Wood, is in 7th grade and this is his last semester in school. However, in the 7 years he has been in Gryffindor, Gryffindor has never won the Quidditch Cup. Seeing that he is about to leave the school with 0 championships, this makes him very desperate. So, before the first Quidditch training in Gryffindor, he gave a passionate speech to his 6 teammates in the Quidditch locker room. All the players unanimously decided that this semester try your best to help Oliver Wood win a championship, lest he leave any regrets. At the same time, Ravenclaw's captain Roger also had to face a new problem. Ravenclaw's absolute ace Yeting actually asked him to quit the Quidditch team. What? You're not going to play Quidditch anymore? Why is that, Ting? Our winning streak has only lasted 2 years, and you're going to quit midway? I told you that after I leave, the next one you are the Quidditch captain. You know, Roger, I don't care about the position of captain at all. Yeting shook his head and said helplessly, in fact, Quidditch is no longer a challenge to me, and I can't fight back against a unilateral massacre. My opponent is not interesting at all. Besides, I am very busy and there is still a lot of research waiting for me to do. But, you are our core, what should we do if you leave? Roger's voice was pleading, if you think Quidditch is a waste of time, you cannot come to training. If it's you, everyone they don't care about that. Ah, Roger, there's really no need to be like this, Yeting patiently persuaded, but you don't have to worry, because everyone else in Ravenclaw actually played well. You see, last semester, the opponent that Hufflepuff match, you won even if I wasn't there, didn't you? After all, Roger finally agreed to Yeting's request to quit the team, but he also asked Yeting to take the time to teach Zhangqiu. As the player with the highest ability in the team, and having the super broomstick modified by Yeting, Zhangqiu immediately became the next core appointed by Roger. To be honest, Zhangqiu's flight skills are actually quite good, but she is a little timid and does not dare to make dangerous moves at critical moments. But now that she has been trained with the Patroness charm, she is much braver than before. After training around March, Yeting even thought that she already had the ability to participate in the Quidditch World Cup, and he made up his mind to give it a try. Quidditch is held every 4 years, and the next Quidditch World Cup will be held next August. Halloween is the day when the little necromancers of Hogwarts can leave Hogwarts and go to Hogsmeade. All the little necromancers are looking forward to this day. But Yeting is an exception. He has lived in Hogsmeade for a long time, and his bus is still parked there. Secondly, he is too busy at the moment. Although he has been able to open a space-time door, this door is too unstable. He has to repeatedly try different methods to maintain the stability of the door before it is possible. Next step. On the morning before Halloween, all the little necromancers happily set out for Hogsmeade. Even Penelope got out of the heavy review and went to Hogsmeade with her friends to relax. Yeting continued to try to stabilize the space-time gate alone, but he did not forget to give the keys to the bus to the 3 girls. By the way, because the space-time gate will have a strong impact on the surrounding space, Yeting does not dare to experiment in the Room of Requirement, because the Room of Requirement originally contains sophisticated space magic. If it is destroyed by the space-time gate, he will not. Ting would probably want to cry without tears. And his new laboratory is the original Slytherin Chamber of Secrets, since Yeting successfully killed the basilisk and destroyed the Horcrux outside the Chamber of Secrets in his 2nd year. The location and entry method of the Chamber of Secrets have not been revealed at all. Others found out, so Yeting made a series of changes to the secret room. Mainly changing the way to enter. And then it became his autumn space. That night, Hogwarts held a sumptuous Halloween dinner as usual, with sumptuous food and exciting performances. The dinner ended with entertainment programs provided by Hogwarts Ghost. Ghosts suddenly appeared from the walls and tables in a sort of gliding procession. Gryffindor's nearly headless Nick successfully recreated his beheading. 0, please give me flowers. The white blood flying all over the sky really shocked many people. However, shortly after Yeting returned to the lounge, a ghost floated in. Ms. Grey, someone shouted in surprise. Ms. Grey is the ghost of Ravenclaw, responsible for providing help to the little necromancer of Ravenclaw. Her real name is Helena Ravenclaw, and she is the daughter of Ravenclaw. Ms. Grey is a proud and well-educated woman. Generally speaking, she rarely appears in the Ravenclaw common room. All students in Ravenclaw, gather in the lobby immediately. This is Dumbledore's order. A worried look appeared on Ms. Gray's beautiful face. This was the first time that Yeting looked at her normally calm face. Saw this expression on. This order surprised everyone, but soon Professor Flitwick rushed to the lounge. Under his leadership, the eaglets lined up back to the auditorium, where they saw Gryffindor, the little necromancers, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin also arrived one after another. In the Great Hall, the Ravenclaw eaglets finally got the news from Gryffindor. Sirius Black had invaded the castle and wanted to enter the Gryffindor lounge. When the fat woman stopped him, he actually destroyed the portrait at the entrance to Gryffindor. The faculty and I will conduct a thorough search of the castle, Professor Dumbledore told the students. At this time, Professor McGonagall and Flitwick closed all the doors of the Great Hall. For your own safety, I think you may have to stay here overnight. I ask the prefects to stand guard at the entrance of the auditorium. The male and female students will stay in the auditorium and be responsible for management. If anything happens, report it to me immediately. Professor Dumbledore paused and was about to leave the auditorium, then said, "Oh, by the way, you will need." With a random wave of his wand, the long tables flew to the edge of the auditorium and stood against the wall. With another wave, the ground was covered with hundreds of purple sleeping bags. "Sleep well," said Professor Dumbledore, closing the door behind him as he went out. The auditorium immediately burst into excitement and buzzing voices. Chapter 132. All the little necromancers were talking about this matter, and they began to discuss how Black invaded Hogwarts. "Do you think Black is still in the castle?" Hermione whispered anxiously. "Dumbledore obviously thinks so." Yeting shrugged. "Do you think he is still in the castle?" Zhongqiu said worriedly while picking sleeping bags, "But how did he break into the school? It's his luck that he picked Gryffindor, isn't it?" Hermione said as they got into their sleeping bags with their clothes on and propped their upper bodies up on their elbows to talk. "Maybe he knows how to apparate," Marietta said from a few feet away. "Just appear out of thin air. You know that? Oh my god, don't tell me you are a Ravenclaw student, don't you know? Hogwarts is a 7/7 that cannot apparate." Hermione gave Marietta a look of disdain. "Don't say that, Hermione." Zhongqiu pulled her gently. "They probably came in disguise," said a fifth-year student from Hufflepuff House. "Otherwise it would have flown in," Dean Thomas said. "Honestly, am I the only one who has taken the trouble to read Hogwarts, a history?" "Oh, Ting. I didn't mean you," Hermione said angrily. "It's very possible." Zhongqiu asked, "But why do you say that?" "Because this castle isn't just protected by walls, you know," said Hermione, "it's also enchanted with all kinds of enchantments to prevent outsiders from sneaking in. You can't get in with stealth. And I guess. Let's see what kind of disguise can fool those Dementors. They guard every entrance. If he flies in, they will see it too. What about the compound potion? Through the compound potion, you can become someone else." Chu Zhang suddenly said, "I wonder if Dementors can see through the compound potion." On the other side, Weasley pointed to the twins who were whispering, "Black must have come in through a secret passage. Hogwarts has many secret passages leading to the school. If he knows the location of these secret passages, he can break into Hogwarts. It's not difficult. Maybe the mysterious man taught him some powerful black magic." Anthony Goldstein said with certainty, "After all, Black was once the #1 general under the mysterious man." "Ting, what do you think?" Hermione turned to Yeting and looked at him curiously, "Don't you care about such things at all?" "Yeah, tell me." Zhongqiu also looked forward to it. The little necromancers nearby all agreed. In any case, the Ravenclaw genius was the smartest among them, and everyone valued his opinions. In fact, Hermione is right. Hogwarts is indeed able to prevent most infiltration methods, and Dementors can also distinguish most disguises because they rely on emotion and smell to identify targets, rather than appearance, so Polyjuice Potion has no effect on Dementors. He glanced at Hermione appreciatively, and Hermione gave him a sweet smile. In fact, there are still several ways to freely enter and leave Hogwarts. Hereby. Are there several kinds? Zhongqiu's voice couldn't help but raise a few points, obviously frightened by Yeting's statement. The first is the secret passage. The school originally had many secret passages leading outside the school. Although Filch knew most of them, there are still a few that are hidden. The second is apparition. Although Hogwarts prohibits necromancers from apparating, goblins and house elves are not restricted. Their magic is different from necromancers. As far as I know, the Black family is one of the 28 sacred clan, and there is a high possibility that there are house elves in their family. On the other side of Yeting, Pinello said dully. 28 sacred tribes? What is that? Hermione asked curiously. Oh, little Hermione, you won't be interested in this. In order to promote their theory, those pure-blood necromancers have summarized the 28 British necromancer families of real pure blood. In short, they are the most looked down on the 28 Muggle families. Pinello said with some disapproval. Yes, the Malfoy, Lestrange, Flint, Parkinson, Greengrass families, Marietta chirped in, all have surnames that sound like Slytherin. What you said is wrong, Zhang-Chu reminded. In fact, the Holy 28 tribes also include Longbarden, Ollivander, and Weasley. Oh. Weasley, Hermione frowned, the red-haired Weasley. Red-haired Weasley. Zhang-Chu nodded confidently. I can't believe it. Hermione clicked her tongue, it's not like their family has a house elf. Yes, the Weasley family has always been an outlier among pure-bloods. Zhang-Chu shrugged. So, is there any other way to sneak into Hogwarts? Hermione looked at Yeting again, her curious eyes shining in the darkness. There is another kind of anima, which is almost the only shape-shifting that can hide the Dementors. Yeting yawned and said lightly, definitely, my anima. Gus is the exception. Hermione and Penelope laughed out loud immediately. Indeed, no one would feel normal watching a dragon enter Hogwarts. However, Yeting's words still shocked the young necromancers. It turns out that Hogwarts has so many loopholes. That was pretty much the only thing on their mind. That night, Dumbledore conducted a thorough investigation in the Hogwarts castle, including the astronomy tower, owl shed, and various professors' rooms, without exception. Unfortunately, they found nothing and Blake did escape. In fact, in addition to the professors, the Dementors were also angry because Black entered Hogwarts under their noses, but Dumbledore refused to allow them to enter Hogwarts for a search. This prevents them from enjoying their meal. In the next few days, everyone in school was talking about Blake. The stories about how he entered the castle are becoming more and more mysterious, but everyone thinks that the Ravenclaw 0.3 genius view is the most reliable. The mutilated portrait of the fat lady had been taken down from the wall, and in its place was a portrait of Lord Cadogan and his fat grey pony. The Gryffindors were almost unlucky, for Sir Cadogan spent half his time challenging people to duels with him. The rest of the time is spent figuring out ridiculously complicated passwords. In one day, he would change his password twice. In addition, the daily atmosphere of Hogwarts has also become weird. Professors will take turns patrolling the corridors, as if the fugitive will emerge from the corridors at any time, and Harry Potter himself is even more closely monitored. Professors found every excuse to walk with him in the corridors, and Percy Weasley followed him everywhere like an extremely airy guard dog. Even his Quidditch training had to be conducted under the supervision of Madame Hooch. Chapter 133. The first Quidditch match is approaching, but another strange thing has happened in Hogwarts. Professor Lupin has been taking sick leave on certain days in recent months. Some people say that he is sick. In a black magic defense class before the game, the young necromancers were surprised to find that the person in front of them was not the popular Professor Lupin, but the annoying Severus Snape. Snape sneered and told them that Professor Lupin was ill, so he would teach this class instead. This greatly disappointed the little necromancers, but what surprised them even more was that Snape ignored their original teaching sequence and set the learning content on werewolves. The little necromancers were talking a lot, and Hermione couldn't restrain her dissatisfaction. But, sir, Hermione stood up and said loudly, we shouldn't learn about werewolves yet. We have just learned Red Riding Hood, Cabba, and Grindylow, in that order. Hinkwick should be next. Ravenclaw then deducted 5 points for this. In the next lesson, Snape began to ask the young necromancers how to identify werewolves and how to kill werewolves, with undisguised malice in his tone. After that, no one made any sound in the 04 class. Everyone sat and took notes about werewolves based on the textbook, while Snape walked back and forth between the desks, checking the work they had completed during Professor Lupin's teaching, and criticizing Lupin's lessons. It's a poor explanation. It's not right. There are more Cabbas in Mongolia. Professor Lupin said it was 8 out of 10? I said it was less than 3 out of 10. The bell finally rang, and Snape didn't let them go. Each of you will write a paper and give it to me. The content is about how to identify and kill werewolves. This topic should be written on 2 pieces of parchment and handed in on Monday morning. Someone should be in charge of this class. Weasley, stay calm down and don't leave, we have to make arrangements for your late studies. In fact, it was not until the next day that everyone knew that Snape taught the same knowledge and assigned the same homework in almost all grades of black magic defense classes. As long as someone pays a little attention, they will find that Professor Snape's behavior has a certain profound meaning in what he is implying. But most little necromancers are just struggling to fill 2 pieces of parchment. However, there are always smart people who can see the intention behind this. For example, the person in front of Yeting is Miss Hermione Granger, who is holding a large armful of homework and looking tired. Don't you think it's strange? She asked Yeting, pretending to be mysterious. It's the homework assigned by Snape. What? Yeting rolled his eyes. What's weird? I'm not telling you, Hermione, you should have a good rest for a few days, you look like you haven't slept for a few days. Oh. Don't worry about it. Hermione raised her eyebrows and said angrily, I'm talking about Snape's black magic defense class and the homework assigned. Okay, Yeting shrugged helplessly, you know, I never care about what the professor teaches in class. Anyway, I can neither listen nor do homework. Let me think about it. I remember he said that he was probably a werewolf, right? Yes, it's a werewolf. Hermione was a little excited and said hurriedly, did you know? I found that Professor Lupin's sick leave time has a certain pattern every month. It's all around the 15th. I didn't pay attention to it at first. At this point, until I finish this black magic defense lesson, guess what I thought of? Professor Lupin actually asks for leave on every full moon day, right? Yes, and I also thought about the first black magic defense lesson he gave us. Hermione's eyes flashed with a strange light. I still remember that he introduced Boggart to us. In the face of when Professor Lupin taught me, the Boggart turned into a white ball, which impressed me deeply. At the time, I thought it was a crystal ball or something, but now it seems that the white ball is full moon. Yeting said calmly, you mean, Professor Lupin is a werewolf? Ah, I didn't expect you already knew. Hermione's eyes widened, she thought. Actually, what you know is exactly what Professor Snape wants to tell you. Yeting shook his head. Professor Snape has been hinting at this, hasn't he? So that's it. Hermione looked shocked. Thinking that her big discovery actually came from the suggestion of her most hated professor, Hermione felt a little disappointed. Humph, this is normal. Snape's feud with Lupin started when they were students, but he probably overestimated the average intelligence of the little necromancers at Hogwarts, because even though he hinted so obviously, it still doesn't matter. Only you can guess the answer. Hate. Hermione looked at Yeting with interest. They used to be classmates? Do you still know this? Definitely, Yeting curled his lips. Lupin, Sirius, Potter's father James Potter, and Peter Pettigrew were 4 good friends in their school days, calling themselves the Marauders. At that time, they bullied Snape together when they were students. But since Sirius betrayed others, killed Peter Pettigrew, and caused James Potter to be killed by Voldemort, the Marauders no longer exist. These secrets made Hermione ponder for a long time. But why did Dumbledore hire Lupin? Hermione looked puzzled. You know, we have almost no ability to resist when facing a violent werewolf. If a little necromancer is bitten by a werewolf, there will be no resistance. How could Dumbledore dare to take the risk of being permanently transformed into a werewolf? What do you think? Yeting looked into Hermione's eyes and asked, why did Dumbledore dare to take this risk? Hermione thought for a while and finally gave the answer. Wolfsbane potion, she said firmly. Snape made Lupin the Wolfsbane potion, didn't he? Ah. She is indeed the know-it-all lady, Yeting nodded with satisfaction, but that's not entirely true. In fact, when Professor Snape was too busy, I also helped with a little help, so if you visit Professor Lupin in these 2 days and you will find a werewolf as docile as a puppy. Hermione finally got a satisfactory answer, and she hurriedly prepared to leave. Before leaving, Yeting reminded her as usual, I think you look too tired. To be honest, the time turner is a waste for you. Burden, you took too many unnecessary classes. Faced with Yeting's persuasion, Hermione had been perfunctory in the past few times, but today, she was uncharacteristically silent for a while, and then replied in a low voice, what you said makes sense, but I still want to stick to it. Okay. Yeting sighed, if you have any questions, Come to me quickly, don't hold it on your own. I will. In fact, Yeting is right. In Notice Hogwarts, except for Hermione Granger, no small necromancer can see Professor Snape's hint. Yeting feels that such a hint has already quite obvious. Is it really a matter of IQ? Chapter 134. In recent days, the weather in Hogwarts has gotten worse and worse, with violent storms and rain all day long, and on the day of the Quidditch match, the situation became even worse. The rumbling thunder in mid-air, the sound of strong winds hitting the castle walls, and the sound of trees breaking in the distant Forbidden Forest all disturbed people from falling asleep early in the morning. However, on such a day, the Quidditch match was still going on as usual. Held. It has to be said that Quidditch is indeed the most popular sport in the necromancer world. Despite the wind and rain, the teachers and students of the school still came out to watch the game as usual. They ran across the lawn to the Quidditch pitch, though they held their heads up to resist the strong wind, because their umbrellas were blown away from their hands by the wind halfway. Even the eaglets of Ravenclaw showed no resistance to ability in the face of Quidditch. On the way to the stadium, Hermione tried to lift the umbrella again and again, but failed without exception. Behind her, Zhang Qiuchen's umbrella, which was shivering with his hands crossed, had been completely blown away. Suddenly, a hand wrapped around Zhang Qiu's shoulder and pulled him to the side. The girl turned around and saw that it was Yeting, who had been elusive recently. He gave the girl a stiff smile, which surprised her. "You can't tell me," she asked happily, "why are you here?" "Ahem, that's because I suddenly wanted to come." Yeting explained dryly, "I just suddenly felt that I had been in the laboratory for too long and wanted to come out and bask in the sun." "Get some sun?" Zhang Qiu looked up at the sky inexplicably. It was still full of black clouds. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, almost blinding her eyes. "Don't listen to his excuses." Suddenly, she heard another female voice explaining to her, "He was just afraid that you would get caught in the rain, so he stepped out of his snail shell, a duplicitous little boy." Hearing this voice, Zhang Qiu's smile immediately fell. It was Pinello. She was walking on the other side of Yeting, holding a small yellow flag in her hand. The black and white badger on the flag was walking around uneasily. After hearing her words, Zhang Qiu realized that no raindrops could fall on her body anymore, and all the rainwater was blocked 1 foot away from their heads. "How's it going?" "It's amazing, isn't it?" Pinello said in a proud tone that made her uncomfortable, and then looked forward again. "Miss Granger. Come here quickly." "Yes, Ting is indeed strong and considerate," Zhang Qiu said in a tone that she had never imagined. There was some tension between the two girls. Soon, Hermione came to Yeting's side. She looked at the top of her head in surprise and asked, "How did you do it? I have never seen this magic in books." "This is just an application of the obstruction spell. Yeting has noticed something is wrong in the atmosphere. As the girls continue to grow up, he has become less and less afraid to call the three of them together when nothing happens." Now Hermione asked a question, and he immediately took the opportunity to change the subject and explain the principle to Hermione. Zhang Qiu and Pinello looked at each other, fell silent in tacit understanding, and the four of them walked forward together. Finally, the other little necromancers around were surprised to find that in this endless rain curtain, there were actually people who could walk without getting wet. Even the strong wind could not hinder them. The other girls cast their envious eyes on the three girls. "Why isn't I the one beside him?" This is the most common thought among them. When arriving at the Quidditch auditorium, almost all the little necromancers were drowned. Near Yeting's seat, Anthony Goldstein cast a fire spell, and many little necromancers gathered around to dry themselves out and keep warm. Terry Butt even set his robe on fire, which caused a lot of chaos in the future. Yeting shook his head and snapped his fingers. The three girls were surprised to find that white steam immediately emerged from their clothes and robes, and then became dry. In the stadium, Mrs. Huoqi was already ordering the players to ride on the broomsticks, but the wind and rain were so loud that everyone could only understand her instructions through mouth movements, and a few players were so stupid that they didn't know what was going on. Fortunately, her silver whistle was a magic item, otherwise they wouldn't even know when the game would start. The competition environment is indeed too harsh. The little necromancers also had to take out their folding binoculars or they couldn't even see the color of the ball-string clothes. Yeting was speechless. These little necromancers were much crazier than the Muggle fans. After the game started, Yeting found that the players' performance was terrible, they were soaked and frozen, and it was difficult to see their teammates clearly, let alone the balls flying around. They were galloping across the court, passing by blurry red and yellow figures, but if they were not paying attention, they would not be able to figure out what was going on in the game. In the strong wind, they could not hear the comments. The audience is hidden beneath a sea of cloaks and wind-blown umbrellas. Chasers and seekers were often almost knocked off their broomsticks by bloodjares because the heavy rain blurred their vision and they couldn't see the bloodjares hitting them from the opposite side. Even the beaters couldn't help them. As the game went on, it became increasingly difficult to keep the broomstick in a straight line. The sky is getting darker and darker, as if the night has decided to come early. Players often nearly bumped into another player, and it was almost impossible to tell whether it was their teammate or the opponent's player. Everyone was soaked through, and the raindrops were so thick that it was almost impossible to see clearly. The most troublesome thing is that in such weather, the snitch is really difficult to detect. Harry Potter and Cedric Diggory had to rely on the flash of light brought by lightning to determine the location of the golden snitch. If there is no way to catch the golden snitch, I don't know how long this game will last. Finally, Harry found an opportunity. He spotted a small golden speck flashing in the rain-covered sky. He chased after it hard, but just as he was about to catch the golden ball, he passed by again. There was lightning and thunder, and he was surprised to find that there were more than 100 Dementors in the sky above Hogwarts, rushing towards the Quidditch pitch. The cheers of the audience suddenly disappeared, and a familiar and terrifying cold current hit from all directions. The little necromancers in the audience couldn't help but shudder, and the smiles on their faces gradually disappeared. Immediately, they noticed the guys floating towards them, and screams of fear suddenly appeared on the Quidditch pitch. And what about Harry Potter himself? He had lost consciousness and fell from the sky. Seeing this terrible scene, Hermione looked at Yeting worriedly. Ting, let's help them. Yeting looked at the three girls around him and asked seriously, do you all think so? That's right, we can't let the Dementors continue like this. Zhangqiu said worriedly. After studying for so long, let's just put it into practice. Pinello also agreed. Okay, Yeting nodded and reminded seriously, remember to ask your patron saint to follow me. So, the four of them raised their wands and shouted at the same time. Call the gods to protect you. The dazzling silver light appeared again, and warmth surrounded the four people and the small necromancer around them, allowing them to relax a little. In full view of everyone, a shining silver-white dragon fluttered its wings and flew out of the Ravenclaw stands, followed by a silver-white flying eagle, a swan, and an otter. These patron saints kept galloping in the air, flying back and forth around the stands. All the Dementors avoided them and had to stay away from the stands, but they refused to leave unwillingly. As a result, Dragon became angry. It opened its mouth, and the pale dragon's breath swept through the group of Dementors. Dozens of Dementors screamed and were burned to death. The rest of the Dementors immediately looked like they had seen a ghost. Scattered away. Before Harry hit the ground, a magic caught him and saved him. It was Dumbledore. Next, he angrily summoned his patroness, which was a phoenix. Phoenix joined the ranks of the patroness led by Dragon, and together with them drove all the Dementors out of Hogwarts. A riot in the stadium was resolved. Chapter 135. Fortunately, the Dementors' invasion of the Quidditch pitch did not cause any accidents. Most of the little necromancers were just frightened by the Dementors. Only Harry was stunned and fell 50 feet in the air. However, due to Dumbledore's timely action, he was not injured. Unfortunately, his Nimbus 2000 lost control after Harry fell, was blown away by the wind, and then hit the Whomping Willow. When Professor Flitwick found it, only a pile of wood fragments remained. The game also ended with Hufflepuff's victory. Diggory caught the golden snitch when the team was 50 points behind, turning the game around in one fell swoop. However, none of this can compare to the surprise that Ravenclaw's genius and his friends brought to everyone. When everyone was facing the threat of Dementors, the four of them stood up, bravely summoned the patron saint, and expelled all the Dementors in front of the teachers and students of the school. The most shocking thing was that Yeting's patron saint, Dragon, actually sprayed out white flames in full view of everyone and burned about a dozen Dementors to death. This was the first time a necromancer could cause it. The death of a Dementor. Everyone had to sigh, he was truly a genius from Ravenclaw. Dumbledore also generously gave Ravenclaw 200 points for this, 50 points each. Everyone felt that this extra point was well deserved. After that, Hermione, Zhangqiu and Penelope also became celebrities on campus. The little necromancers asked them how to use the patroness charm. Everyone was frightened on the Quidditch field. This made the three girls famous for a while, and even Hermione, who had been focusing on her studies for a long time and seemed to be unsociable among the girls, also gained a lot of fans. On the other side, Dumbledore and magic had a conflict over this matter. In fact, Cornelius Fudge has been having a hard time recently. Because the Dementors broke into the Quidditch pitch, Harry Potter almost fell to death. He must bear this responsibility. Although Fudge used his power to suppress this matter, the matter still spread in the necromancer community, because many young necromancers were frightened by Dementors, and they wrote letters to their homes. The Ministry of Magic can't intercept everyone's owls. Media such as Necromancer Weekly and Daily Prophet have made a series of reports on this matter. Everyone is doubting the Ministry of Magic's control over the Dementors. Zhang Chu read out loud from the Necromancer Weekly, some people think that letting the Dementors stationed at Hogwarts is a stupid decision. Cornelius Fudge will not evacuate the Dementors. Yeting said disdainfully, Sirius Black is the first necromancer in history to escape from Azkaban. This makes Fudge lose face, and he has also been questioned from all sides. So he must catch Black to prove his ability, otherwise there will be a bunch of people shouting for him to step down. Get out of the way quickly. I am the Minister of Magic. I have something to see Dumbledore now. Cornelius Fudge shouted anxiously in front of a huge ugly stone monster on the 8th floor of Hogwarts Castle. Unfortunately, the stone monster would not recognize his privileges and let him go just because the person in front of him was the Minister of Magic. It still asked in a stiff tone, "Password." Fudge was furious, but his magic was so bad that there was nothing he could do with this mechanism. The password is sorbet balls. A familiar and majestic voice suddenly came from behind Fudge. The monster immediately jumped aside. The wall behind it cracked in half, and behind the wall was a spiral staircase. Cornelius Albus Dumbledore walked over, his light blue eyes staring at the other person calmly through his half-moon glasses. Dumbledore. Fudge's speaking momentum couldn't help but weaken a bit. I think you should give me an explanation. Dumbledore's eyes flashed with a hint of anger. Why did the Dementors break into the campus privately? I don't think this was included in the prior promise. They almost killed a student. This was an accident. Fudge stammered, this is indeed the responsibility of the Ministry of Magic. It is our failure to manage the Dementors properly. I'm sorry, Dumbledore, I promise. This will never happen again. I hope you can keep your promise this time and control him. Dumbledore said as he walked into his office without looking back. Wait, Dumbledore. Cornelius Fudge seemed to remember his purpose, walked up and shouted, Hogwarts needs to be responsible for the casualties of Dementors. Responsible for the Dementor casualties? Dumbledore raised his eyebrows. Yes. 18 Dementors were eliminated, and 7 more were seriously injured. Fudge tried to make his tone sound more angry. It was your student, that Tingye, who did the good deeds. It was him. Used his patroness to destroy the Dementors. They are the guards of Azkaban and the law enforcement officers of the Ministry of Magic. Even if they broke into the Hogwarts campus, you can't just show off like this. European and American them. 0, please give me flowers. Oh, really? Dumbledore curled his lips. Ah, this is indeed my responsibility. It is our poor management of students. I'm sorry, Cornelius. But this is also an accident, I promise it won't happen again in the future. After that, Dumbledore returned to his office. Cornelius Fudge tried to catch up, but was blocked again by the ugly stone monster. Password. He gritted his teeth with some resentment and wanted to say something loudly, but in the end he lowered his head and left dejectedly. But Dumbledore didn't know it didn't end like this. At breakfast the next day, Yeting received a letter from the Ministry of Magic. The letter mentioned that Yeting had harmed a public official of the Ministry of Magic and needed to come to the Ministry of Magic for trial that day. 0 At the same time, the Ministry of Magic also sent 2 Aurors to Hogwarts, preparing to take Yeting away. This was the Ministry of Magic's revenge. The behavior of the Ministry of Magic caused an uproar in Hogwarts. The young necromancers felt unfair to Yeting, because Yeting hurt the Dementors to protect them. We will not let you be taken away by them, Cedric Diggory declared on behalf of the Hufflepuff necromancers. That's right. We support you, Yet. My mother works at the Ministry of Magic and I will write to her. Don't let them take you away. The little necromancers of Ravenclaw and Gryffindor all expressed their support for Yeting, and even the little necromancers of Slytherin were no exception. At this moment, the entire Hogwarts shared the same hatred. And Hermione also said seriously to Yeting, if the Ministry of Magic wants to take you away, I will go with you, because it was my initiative. We are all accomplices, Zhang Qiu said angrily, if you want to go, just go together. The Ministry of Magic actually issued such a ridiculous order, Pinello sneered. I want to go with you to find out who the idiot is who issued such an order. The professors had even stood in front of the orators. No one can take away my students in front of me. Professor Flitwick was furious. His short stature was like an angry lion at this moment. Professor McGonagall also stood in front of Yeting. I don't allow you to get close to him. Only Hogwarts can punish Hogwarts students. The two orators had a wry smile on their faces, facing a dilemma. Chapter 136. Just as the teachers and students of Hogwarts were in a stalemate with the orators of the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore finally appeared. Seeing the principal, the professors and students seemed to have seen the backbone, and they all turned their attention to Dumbledore. After Dumbledore listened to the whole thing expressionlessly, he said nothing and instead looked at Yeting. What do you think? Mr. Yet? He asked slowly, what do you think we should do? I think, Yeting curled his lips and sneered, I can go and have a look with them, but I have never seen the Ministry of Magic. What? You want to go with them? Yeting's decision immediately caused an uproar among the teachers and students at Hogwarts. They could not understand why Yeting made such a decision, and they all began to persuade Yeting. However, Yeting had already made his decision and could not change it. He could only thank everyone for their kindness and keep this friendship in mind. At this time, it was Dumbledore who spoke again. He coughed twice, attracting everyone's attention. I will go with Mr. Ye, he said in a serious tone, I will represent Hogwarts and ensure that Mr. Ye receives fair treatment at the Ministry of Magic. The teachers and students reluctantly agreed to this decision. Before leaving, Hermione suddenly stepped forward and kissed Yeting on the face, as if bidding farewell to a warrior who was about to conquer the demon network. There were whistles and cheers all around. Behind Hermione, Zhang Qiu curled his lips in frustration. Really, why did you let this nerd get the lead? She blamed herself, I wish I were braver. Next, Pinello walked up to Yeting openly and kissed him on the other side of his face. The whistles and cheers grew louder. Zhang Qiu almost shed tears of grievance, and she blamed herself even more. So, accompanied by Dumbledore and two orators, Yeting came to a small alley in London. The surroundings were very desolate, with only a few shabby-looking offices, a bistro, and an almost full car. Overflowing dump truck. We're here. One of the taller orators pointed to a dilapidated red phone booth with several pieces of glass missing, and behind it was a wall that was painted messy. You go in first, Vomit Doctor. In fact, the real entrance to the Ministry of Magic is a small toilet 300 meters away. People who need to enter the Ministry of Magic must flush themselves into the toilet. But Yeting felt that it was stupid and tasteless to enter the Ministry of Magic in this way, so the four of them came to this emergency entrance. Yeting walked in, looked at the phone equipment in the phone booth carefully, frowned, and then immediately relaxed. Another short and fat aura originally wanted to squeeze in together, but suddenly, Yeting pulled out his wand and recited a spell to the surrounding glass, and the surrounding area immediately became spacious. What did you do? The short and fat aura immediately pointed his wand at Yeting nervously, but he immediately discovered that it was just a traceless stretching spell. Yeting used it in a second to remove the phone booth. The space has been expanded without disturbing the original magic of the phone booth. I just feel that the facilities of the Ministry of Magic are too backward. This is just my small contribution to the infrastructure of the Ministry of Magic. No need to thank me. Yeting glanced at him and said lightly, also, don't take it, the magic wand is pointed at me, there will be no next time. Ah, I'm sorry. The short, fat aura put down his wand. He was already frightened by Yeting's move. Even a master alchemist would spend an hour to cast the traceless extension charm on a space as big as a phone booth. All day long, and it will interfere with the operation of other spells, which is why this phone booth is still so cramped until now. The child in front of him only took 1 second to accomplish something that no one else could do. His alchemy level was at least comparable to Dumbledore's, even higher levels of him were unthinkable. Thinking of this, the aura couldn't help but shudder. He heard that the person being interrogated this time was only 14 years old, which meant that the boy in front of him could be on par with Dumbledore in alchemy at the age of 14. In time, his achievements may not surpass that of Dumbledore. Now that the Ministry of Magic is targeting such a figure, isn't it asking for trouble? Thinking this way, his attitude towards Yeting immediately became much more respectful. It was no longer the respect that was hindered by Dumbledore's feelings, but respect and fear from the bottom of his heart. Dumbledore and the tall Auror also walked into the phone booth one after another. They were immediately stunned by the scene in front of them. Dumbledore nodded and said happily, "It's a great traceless extension spell. You have already done this in this regard. More than anyone else, I bet Nico would be proud of you." Yeting shrugged indifferently, and then pointed at the microphone and dial with his wand. Suddenly, the ground of the phone booth suddenly trembled. They slowly sank into the ground. The two Aurors watched in horror as the pavement rose higher and higher outside the glass window of the phone booth, until finally, darkness fell above them. "How is this possible?" shouted the tall Auror. "How did you do it? I mean, we haven't even called yet." "It's just simple alchemy, it can be easily cracked." Yeting said lightly, "The person who designed this 570 phone booth is really stupid. He actually put the magic text that controls the operation of the phone booth in the phone booth. What's the use of just putting the driver script in the Ministry of Magic? Just bypass the driver script and drive it manually to make it run." The two Aurors didn't understand what Yeting was saying at all, but that didn't stop them from admiring him. Finally, one of the Aurors spoke, "You shouldn't do this, it will give others a bad impression," he advised. "The trial is voted by the Wisengamot jury. If the impression is good." "Who said I'm here to accept the verdict?" Yeting glanced at him, as if he said something ridiculous. "I'm here to complain. The Ministry of Magic actually allowed the Dementors to attack me and my classmates. This is terrible. This is not the first time. Do you really think I have a good temper?" The Auror was speechless and had no choice but to turn his attention to Dumbledore, but Dumbledore just kept smiling the whole time and said nothing, as if he had no idea what had just happened. The Auror opened his mouth, but finally gave up further persuasion. He suddenly had an ominous premonition that this time the Ministry of Magic's interrogation of the boy might not end so easily. He already had the urge to resign immediately. Chapter 137. After about a minute, the friction sound of the phone booth as it sank into the ground stopped. The door suddenly opened. Yeting stepped out and found that the exit had been surrounded by a group of Aurors. Each of them held a wand and pointed it in the direction of the phone booth, as if they were facing an enemy, until they saw Dumbledore. "Oh, it turns out it's you, Professor Dumbledore." The leading Auror immediately walked up to him and started chatting with him. "My subordinates and I were notified that the Ministry of Magic had been invaded and someone was using the entrance in violation of regulations." "Phone booth, do you know what's going on?" "Oh, Mr. Scrimgeour, in fact, I was right next to the phone booth when it was invaded." Dumbledore pointed at Yeting and said with a smile, "My students think the phone booths in the Ministry of Magic are too backward. Even if they are an underage necromancer can break its spell." Then, he demonstrated how to break it in front of us. In fact, after watching it, I agreed with him. It's time for the Ministry of Magic's facilities to be upgraded. That's it. The Auror couldn't believe what Dumbledore said. How could an underage necromancer do such a thing? He looked at the two Aurors who went to detain Yeting with questioning eyes. However, the two subordinates actually nodded in agreement. This made Scrimgeour frown. It wasn't until another Auror named Kingsley came to his ear and described the identity of the underage necromancer in front of him in detail that he suddenly nodded and looked at Yeting. Became respect. "Oh, it turns out to be Mr. Yat, the youngest necromancer chess champion, twice awarded the Order of Merlin, and the first animagus of magical creatures." He greeted Yeting. "I'm sorry. You have to go to the courtroom with us, it's your duty, sorry." Yeting nodded lightly and walked forward under the leadership of Scrimgeour, while the rest of the Aurors left one after another, leaving only the two who were going to Hogwarts following them. They were at the end of a long, splendid hall with polished dark wooden floors. The peacock blue ceiling is inlaid with gleaming golden symbols, constantly moving and changing, like a huge amount of high-altitude bulletin board. The walls on all sides are paneled with glossy dark wooden boards, and many gilded fireplaces are embedded in the wooden boards. Every few seconds, with a soft pop sound, a necromancer suddenly appears from a fireplace on the left. On the right, there are several people queuing up in front of each fireplace, waiting to leave. In the middle of the foyer is a fountain. This is a circular pool, in which stands a group of pure gold statues that are larger than life. The tallest among them is a noble wizard, holding his wand high and pointing straight to the sky. Surrounding him were a beautiful witch, a centaur, a goblin, and a house elf. Centaurs, goblins, and house elves all looked up at the two necromancers in admiration. Shining jets of water spurted out from the tip of the necromancer's wand, from the centaur's arrow, from the tip of the goblin's hat, and from the two ears of the house elf. There were the sounds of beep beep and beep beep and beep beep all around, the sounds of pop and pop made by operating people, and the chaotic footsteps of hundreds of male and female necromancers. With the lifeless expressions characteristic of the morning on their faces, they walked swiftly towards the row of golden doors at the other end. Yeting glanced at the statue with disgust. He knew that at least the centaurs would not look at the necromancer with this look. The arrogance of the Ministry of Magic was clearly reflected in this statue. "Come with me." Scrimgeour and Yeting walked forward among the staff of the Ministry of Magic. "Your trial will be in the 10th courtroom on the 10th floor." They left the stream of ministry staff heading towards the golden doors. At a table on the left, under a sign that read "Security Check," sat a closely shaven necromancer in a peacock blue robe. "I have a guest," Scrimgeour said, pointing to Harry. "Come this way," the necromancer said listlessly. Yeting approached him, and the necromancer raised a long golden rod, which was as thin and flexible as a car's antenna. He used it to sweep across Yeting's chest and back from top to bottom. "Magic wand." The security necromancer muttered to Yeting, "Put down the golden thing," and stretched out his hand. Yeting took out a purple wand and handed it to the necromancer. It was his first wand. The two Aurors looked at Yeting in surprise, but said nothing. "For safety reasons, I will keep this wand temporarily." The security necromancer glanced at Yeting and said slowly. "What? This is against the rules," one of the Aurors cried out. Scrimgeour glared at him, but said aloud, "It seems that the Ministry of Magic has no rules for untried necromancers to surrender their wands. This is an order from the Minister of Magic." The security necromancer replied lazily, "If you have any problems, please file a complaint directly with the minister." "I'm so sorry." Scrimgeour mumbled from his throat, feeling a little embarrassed. He lowered his head and silently led Yeting forward. As a result, before they had taken a few steps, they were stopped by a group of Aurors, led by a short and fat witch who looked like a pale, leprous toad. She has a broad, flabby face with no visible neck, a big mouth drooping downward, and her eyes are large, round, and slightly bulging outward. "Mr. Ting Yat," the witch said in a high-pitched voice like a little girl making a fuss, "please hand over your massage wand." Scrimgeour glared at the witch in front of him and raged like an old lion, "Ms. Dolores Umbridge. This gentleman's wand was taken away by your people just now. Yet. What else do you want?" Qian Zhao's, then, he looked at the Aurors behind Umbridge, "Why are you here? I didn't give any other mission orders, right?" The Aurors could not help but shrink their necks, obviously frightened. Director." The Aurors were speechless. Okay, Scrimgeour, don't embarrass your subordinates." Umbridge said, with a fake smile on her face, her two big round eyes still as cold as before, "This is the minister's order. From now on, the task of detaining Mr. Ting Yip will be taken over by me, the high-level deputy minister of the Ministry of Magic, Dolores Umbridge." She laughed like a silver bell, making people's hair stand on end. Scrimgeour stared at Umbridge with a pair of sharp yellow eyes behind his gold-rimmed glasses, nodded slightly to Yeting and Dumbledore, and then limped away. Chapter 138. Dolores Umbridge is a well-known clown and nuisance in the world of Harry Potter. In the original book, Umbridge was the black magic defense professor at Hogwarts when Harry Potter was in his 5th year, and became the high-level inquisitor and principal of Hogwarts in the following year. These three positions gave her great power in Hogwarts, and she began to take authoritarian measures against the students and teachers of the school. While at Hogwarts, she was known for her cruelty and abuse of punishments to students. Most students and teachers dislike her because of her condescending way of interfering in the school. Yeting knew this woman. She was Fuji's confidant. She was domineering, self-righteous, unreasonable, rigid and high-pressure. She was a person with an unparalleled desire for control. Her appearance represents Fudge's will. Sure enough, the instigator of all this was Cornelius Fudge 270. On the one hand, he relied on Dumbledore's help to become the Minister of Magic, but on the other hand, he became obsessed with status and power, and even began to ignore Dumbledore. Opinion, suspected that Dumbledore wanted to usurp his position as minister. This Dementor incident made him lose face, so he planned to start with Yeting and show his authority through his trial. Seeing this woman now shows that Cornelius Fudge has no good intentions. He wanted to see what this woman was going to do. Sure enough, when Umbridge came, nothing good would happen. She did not pay attention to Yeting first, but said to Dumbledore in her disgusting tone, "Dear Mr. Dumbledore, please go first, Wesson. The members of Gamo are waiting for you." Dumbledore glanced at Umbridge meaningfully and said with a smile, "Oh, really? Then I have to hurry up, but I don't think you will care too much about an ignorant person, right?" "Yes, dear Professor Dumbledore," Umbridge smiled like a little girl, which was disgusting. Who would argue with an ignorant child? Dumbledore nodded with satisfaction and then strode forward. Umbridge immediately smiled proudly at Yeting, but he didn't know that Dumbledore didn't mean this to her. Then, Mr. Ting Yat, watching Dumbledore disappear from sight, Umbridge finally showed her fangs. "Please hand over all the alchemy tools you have. I doubt they will do anything to you. Ministry of Magic staff pose threats, you know, you have such a criminal record." "Prince record? You mean those Dementors?" Yeting said with a sneer, "I hope you will be willing to get close and personal with those Ministry of Magic staff." "Okay." Umbridge screamed, "I don't have time to chat with you here, so hurry up and hand over all the alchemy items you have with you." "Oh, okay, as long as you can control them." Yeting took out a small dragon skin bag with a traceless extension spell from his pocket and handed it over. An Auror took the bag and searched inside. He dug out a silver bell from his bag. "Oh, a bell," Umbridge scoffed, "is this your magic item? Is it for keeping cats?" "No, this is a soundless bell that can absorb sound." Yeting looked at her like she was an idiot. Seemingly irritated by Yeting's eyes, Umbridge snatched the bell from the Auror's hand and said sharply, "Stop joking, Mr. Yat, even you can do it." Then she was completely speechless, because she was surprised to find that no matter what she said, she just moved her mouth in vain, and no sound came out, and no matter what sounds the surrounding necromancers made, she couldn't hear them. She felt that there was some curse on the bell and that she must be deaf. "Take it away! Take it away!" She screamed nervously at the Aurors, but the Aurors looked at each other and did nothing, because in their eyes, Umbridge was just opening her mouth constantly, but what? No words were spoken. Finally, Umbridge couldn't bear it anymore, and she wanted to throw the bell out regardless. "I advise you not to do this," Yeting warned while suppressing a smile, but Umbridge couldn't hear anything, so she threw the bell a few meters away in a panic. Yeting had no choice but to snap his fingers because he had cast a soundproof magic. The next moment, the soundless bell was triggered, and all the absorbed sounds burst out at the same time. Dragon roars, screams, explosions, voices, roars, whistling, all kinds of sounds were mixed together, and a sonic storm immediately erupted in this corridor. The strong loud noise seemed to make the air tremble. The surrounding walls were also covered with cracks, dust and gravel fell from the ceiling, and all the glass shattered in response. But Umbridge and the Aurors were miserable. The closest Auror was knocked away on the spot, and then fainted to the ground, with blood flowing from both ears. It looked like his eardrum was ruptured. The other Aurors also covered their ears in pain, and the violent noise gave them splitting headaches. Umbridge was actually quite lucky, because she was the one who threw the bell, so she was not seriously injured, but the intense headache and tinnitus still caused her pain for a while. The loud noise made by the silent bell almost alarmed the entire Ministry of Magic. Aurors and other staff rushed to the scene and dragged the stunned necromancers to St. Mungo's Hospital of Magic. They were busy using magic to restore the damaged buildings, and there were people helping to treat the pain of the injured. When everyone learned that the source of the accident was just the small bell in front of them, everyone expressed deep surprise. An old necromancer from the magic maintenance department picked up the bell on the ground, observed it carefully, and praised, "It's an amazing magic prop. Its principle is somewhat similar to Dumbledore's Deluminator. I dare say that its manufacturing the level of alchemy is by no means inferior to Dumbledore." However, Umbridge's scream interrupted him, "Curse! It's a curse! That boy cast black magic on this bell. He wants to use this bell to murder me. He wants to kill me. Or what? Why not catch him?" The Aurors looked at me and I looked at you, but no one came forward. "That's enough. Dolores." The old necromancer at the magic maintenance office interrupted her angrily, "Are you insulting my alchemy level? This bell only has the function of absorbing and emitting sounds, and it has no black function. Magic. The accident just now must have been a mistake by someone." After speaking, he looked at Yeting excitedly, "Is this bell your work?" What a genius idea! There was another genius in alchemy after Dumbledore. 11. The old necromancer's words aroused some discussion. He is the director of the Magic Maintenance Department and is considered an authority in the Ministry of Magic in terms of alchemy. His words made the Aurors have to believe that there is no black magic here and that all accidents are Umbridge's own fault. Operational error. Chapter 139. Umbridge had to shut her mouth in frustration. Now she had to face the reality that she was humiliating herself from beginning to end. But she still glared at Yeting angrily, thinking about how to get back in revenge. Finally, the surrounding necromancers and staff left one after another. Before leaving, the old necromancer babbled to Yeting that he hoped he could work in the Ministry of Magic after graduation. Then he changed his mind and said that working in the Ministry of Magic was a complete waste of his time. Ability. Seeing the confident Yeting in front of her, Umbridge took a deep breath angrily and said, "Continue the inspection." The Auror in charge of the inspection couldn't help but shuddered. Just a small bell had caused such an accident, and he didn't know what would happen next. Under Umbridge's gaze, the Auror had no choice but to put his hand into the dragon skin bag again. After a while, he pulled out a broomstick with golden petals and gorgeous patterns from the bag. It is Yeting's sun wheel. What is this, a flying broomstick? Umbridge looked at the sun disk carefully and let out an unpleasant laugh. It's a model I've never seen on the market. 04, I made it myself. Yeting explained casually. Make it yourself. Umbridge said excitedly as if she had grasped something, that is, privately manufacturing and selling unregistered broomsticks. By the way, this is it, write it down. Auror, put this down quickly. The broom was confiscated. Then, she turned to Yeting and emphasized with a righteous tone, now we suspect that you privately manufactured and sold unregistered broomsticks, so they must be temporarily confiscated. We must wait until the trial is over to confirm that you did not sell broomsticks. Only then can I return the suspicion to you. This is for. Okay, if you are confident that you can keep it safe. Yeting interrupted Umbridge's official tone impatiently. Are you looking down on our Ministry of Magic? Umbridge snorted and signaled the Auror to take the sun wheel away. She continued to check. So, the Auror took the broom in his hand, turned around and was about to leave. However, the moment he picked up the broom, he suddenly had an ominous premonition. The broom suddenly became hot in his hand, and the high temperature caused blisters on his hands. He screamed and wanted to let go. Everyone was attracted by his sudden scream and looked in his direction. It's already too late. At that moment, the sun disk burst out with dazzling golden light. It was as if his name shone like a real sun. Only Yeting turned around in time. The dazzling and scorching light instantly caused everyone to lose their sight. The Aurors all covered their red and swollen eyes, and eye oil kept flowing down. It was as if the front had withstood a dozen flash bombs that exploded at the same time. Immediately afterwards, the Auror holding the sun disk began to scream. Golden flames burned on his arms, burning his arms into charcoal almost instantly. The flames spread upwards along his arms, and soon ignited him into a torch, even if someone extinguished him in time. This Auror is only a dying charcoal. But it wasn't over yet. The sun disk began to fly around. All the Aurors he touched were infected with the ultra-high temperature flames. Everyone began to use water-making spells on each other. But it is of little use, the temperature of the flame is too high, and when there is insufficient water, it just makes the scene filled with water vapor. Soon, the place turned into a sea of fire, and even the floors and walls were melting in the ultra-high temperature flames. The flames spread everywhere, but in front of Yeting, they were like Moses parting the sea, not daring to get close at all. The desperate Auror screamed loudly and fled in all directions, trying to stay away from the sea of fire. In the panic, the short, fat and clumsy Umbridge was knocked to the ground twice by the running Aurors, and then was stepped on several times in a panic. Gradually, the entire hall was engulfed in flames, and even the fountains, signs, etc. were set alight. Umbridge's clothes were burned after finally getting scared. She ran through the hall screaming, and jumped into the fountain like a depth charge, hoping to alleviate the burning feeling a little. But then, the fire spread to the vicinity of the hot spring. The statues in the hot spring were completely melted by the high temperature. The golden water flowed into the pool, stirring up a white mist. The pool boiled instantly, and a short and fat figure emerged from the white mist. The figure screamed and ran away. As the water in the pool evaporated, the entire hall was completely covered by white mist, and golden flames were everywhere in the white mist, completely burning and destroying the hall at 10 o'clock. When the entire hall burned down to nothing, the support from the Ministry of Magic came belatedly. The Aurors and other Ministry of Magic staff worked in groups of 3 or 5 and used water-creating spells on the burned place at the same time. And at the same time, there are people who use sweeping spells to blow away the water vapor and maintain the vision. Fortunately, the hall is now almost completely burnt. There are only a few places where there are still burning flames, and most of the places are just covered in white ashes. The whole place is covered with white ash. The hall was burned to the ground. In terms of personnel, most of the people present saw that the situation was not good and fled the hall in time. Only the dozens of Aurors who were closest were injured. Most of these Aurors were scalded or burned over large areas of their skin, and a few had their hands and feet cut off, or their whole bodies were burned into a ball of black coal. Fortunately, because the temperature of the flame was too high, the surface of the injured person's skin was quickly carbonized, and the deeper internal organs were not burned, although they were almost cooked. But under the protection of magic, these seriously injured people still breathed a sigh of relief. Presumably, in St. Mungo's Hospital of Magic, these people still have a chance to get healthy. Umbridge herself was luckier. She was not directly burned by the flames, but was scalded in the boiling pool. Now the skin all over her body is ulcerated and blistered, which makes her more like a leprosy toad. Looking at the completely disfigured hall in front of them, all the Aurors looked like they had survived a desperate situation. At the moment, everyone looked at Yeting with fear in their eyes. They were afraid that Yeting would come back again. Use some terrible magic item to destroy this place. Yeting's sun disk was also closely monitored by 3 Aurors. Although at the moment, the sun disk was lying quietly on the ground, the 3 Aurors still stood far away, holding wands in their hands. Looking at it nervously, fearing that it would suddenly run away again. Chapter 140. Finally, after the wailing Umbridge was carried away, one of her Aurors stood up. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and asked Yeting, "What do you want? Do you want to destroy the Ministry of Magic?" Hearing his words, Yeting immediately understood what was going on. The hall in front of him was burned to rubble. This was a huge responsibility, and it was all caused by the mistakes of Umbridge and these Aurors. Umbridge is the confidant of the Minister of Magic. Mr. Minister may use his power to hold her, but the price is that these Aurors must bear the responsibility for their work mistakes and cause huge losses to the Ministry of Magic. In order to avoid responsibility, the responsibility for the accident must be placed on Yeting and let him take the blame for them. Yeting glanced at him indifferently and said sarcastically, "What's wrong? You can't deal with my magic props, so you're going to cause trouble for me? I've been cooperating with your work honestly. You deliberately let Ms. Umbridge get the bell," the Auror argued loudly and forcefully. "You were bullying her because she didn't understand magic items. You just wanted to watch the Ministry of Magic's jokes. Really?" Yeting shrugged, "Then why does the Ministry of Magic want a person who doesn't understand magic props or alchemy to collect magic props?" The Auror was choked immediately, but he immediately added, "What about the so-called flying broomstick? It is obviously a magic item that can set fire. But you lied to us and said it was a flying broomstick. 11. Do you want me to fly around in front of you?" Yeting whistled, and the sun wheel immediately flew in front of him, floating quietly next to his thigh, ready for him to ride on it at any time. But Sun Luan's movements immediately aroused their vigilance, and they pointed their wands at Yeting and his broomstick as if facing a formidable enemy. "Get him away," the leader of the Aurors shouted loudly, "Get that thing away." However, at this time, Yeting's expression had changed. "This is the second time," he said in an angry and cold tone, "Don't point the wand at me." Several Aurors subconsciously wanted to put down their wands, but were glared at by the leading Auror. "He is just a 14-year-old boy. Although he has some abilities in alchemy, there are so many of us. Do you still fear him? Really?" Yeting sneered and waved his left hand. The Aurors immediately felt a huge force coming from them, and dozens of Aurors were caught off guard and sent flying. The Aurors fell to the ground and were stunned, but Yeting was not slow in his movements. He casually picked up a wand from one of the Aurors, pointed it at the ground, and the bare floor immediately cracked. He made big holes and swallowed all the Aurors, leaving only their heads exposed. However, a few well-trained Aurors reacted in time and escaped Yeting's curse by rolling and crawling. Immediately afterwards, they launched a counterattack. One of the Aurors first chanted a coma spell at Yeting. Yeting flicked the spell away with a wave of his left hand. After him, the spell shot towards Yeting like raindrops. However, these simple spells could not help him at all. Yeting's mastery of the armor spell was considered to be extremely proficient. He used both hands to block and block all the spells, either blocking or deflecting them. The two aurors were disarmed and knocked unconscious by the rebounding spell, losing their combat effectiveness. "Damn it, don't treat him like a child," the leader of the auror shouted angrily, "let's attack together and give him something powerful." "No, Delis, he is only 14 years old, we can't do this to him." A middle-aged auror retorted, "I think we must stay calm." "Keep calm? Are you kidding, Prout?" Delis said viciously. "This damn Mudblood not only burned down the hall of the Ministry of Magic, but also attacked the aurors. We must kill him." He couldn't say the next words at all. Yeting pointed his wand, and a shoe brush suddenly appeared in Delis's mouth. Delis opened his mouth wide and wanted to spit out the shoe brush, but the shoe brush followed the command of Yeting's wand and brushed it back and forth in Delis' mouth, making him choke and roll his eyes and drool. Froth flowed from the corner of his mouth. "You'd better not say that word again, otherwise I won't mind washing your mouth." Yeting looked around at the aurors indifferently. The aurors couldn't help but stiffen, and some of them subconsciously covered their heads. "Mouth. 0, please give me flowers." "Please calm down, Mr. Yet." Plot took a few steps forward and persuaded, "Let go of Delis, and I guarantee that no one will chant a spell on you in the future." "Prout." Among the aurors, several dissatisfied voices suddenly sounded, but Prout's reputation among them seemed to be pretty good, so no one took any further action. Finally, the brush in Delis's mouth stopped working. He immediately took out the brush, threw it to the ground angrily, and then gasped loudly. The 10 blows just now almost made him suffocate. He stared at Yeting fiercely, his eyes full of fear and hatred. "Okay, Mr. Yet, please put down your wand. You must know that attacking an auror in the Ministry of Magic is a very serious crime." Prout further persuaded, "If you put down your wand now, we can treat it as nothing." None of it happened. "Really?" Yeting asked back, "I've already said it, don't point the wand at me, I'm not your prisoner." "Stop talking," Deli 10 said loudly after Plot regained his composure, "we must catch him." He burned down the entire hall of the Ministry of Magic. "Burn down the hall of the Ministry of Magic." Yeting sneered, his voice getting louder and louder, "It was you who asked for my wand to be confiscated, it was you who asked for my magic items to be confiscated, and it was you who took my broom out of my bag. Yes, now you are saying that I burned down the halls of the Ministry of Magic." Delis was speechless after being nudged by him, feeling that he had lost face. So the next moment, he became jealous again and took action again in anger. The magic wand in his hand flickered, and a curse immediately flew towards Yeting. "I won't be merciful this time," Yeting said coldly. He flicked the wand in his hand, and the curse returned the same way and hit Delis. He opened his mouth to say something. But instead of spitting out words, he belched loudly, and several slugs spit out from his mouth. "It's unbelievable." The aurors raised their wands again with vigilance. This young boy's spellcasting skills were so powerful that they felt horrified. The powerful Delis cast such a curse, but he was able to cast it easily. The road bounced back a little. Chapter 141. "Oh, that's disgusting, but I won't forgive you just like this." Yeting curled his lips and waved his wand lightly, and Delis's wand immediately flew into his hand. "Stop! What do you want to do? Could it be?" The aurors tried to stop Yeting, but it was too late. Yeting broke Delis's wand into 2 pieces. "Ollivander will definitely thank me." Yeting looked at the aurors in front of him calmly and warned, "Which of you still wants me to take action? I don't think Ollivander would mind reading a few more wands." "Clothes." The aurors were frightened. The boy in front of them had just buried a dozen aurors in the ground in one breath, and now he casually snatched the wand from the hands of a well-trained auror. This kind of fighting power is estimated to be only that of Dumbledore. Leto and the Dark Lord must be one step ahead of him. "What are you waiting for?" Delis squatted on the ground, holding his stomach, spitting out slugs from his mouth, and growled, "Quickly subdue this arsonist, otherwise you will bear the consequences. Can you afford that responsibility?" "Ugh!" Another fist-sized slug came out of his throat. The aurors hesitated for a moment, then raised their wands again and pointed them at Yeting. "Have you already thought about it?" Yeting sneered, it seems that Ollivander is destined to make a lot of money. The Aurors seemed to be angered by his arrogance. One Auror shouted, "Let's go! Surround him!" As a result, the Aurors dispersed around Yeting and took action at the same time. More than a dozen magic spells flew in Yeting's direction from different angles. But Yeting repeated his old tricks and completely blocked this wave of attacks with just his wand and cloak to resist or provoke. Since the Aurors were distributed around him, these spells were accurately deflected by him to other Aurors around him, which forced them to attack while also defending against their own people's spells. However, Yeting suppressed all the enemies while fully defending. What a terrible technique! There was a hint of gloom in the hearts of the Aurors. Can we really defeat the boy in front of us? No. One of the Aurors shouted fiercely, "Ordinary spells are useless to him, use jinxes." The others looked at each other and made up their minds. They no longer pursued the use of ordinary spells to subdue Yeting, but decided to defeat him through powerful evil spells. This was considered serious behavior for an Auror, hexing an unconvicted necromancer who was underage. The Aurors once again chanted powerful spells at Yeting, all of which were evil spells that could not be easily blocked. But Yeting didn't panic at all, and his expression didn't even change. Seeing that the curse was about to hit, he just rolled up his cloak, his whole body flickered, and disappeared in an instant. The next second, he appeared behind the Aurors. This was an advanced use of apparition, discarding distance and increasing the casting speed, just like teleportation. Before the Aurors could react, Yeting pointed his wand at them and muttered something. This was a spell that the Aurors had never heard of. Immediately afterwards, they were surprised to find that they could no longer stand firmly on the ground. Everyone became light and airy, with their feet leaving the ground and floating in thin air. Got up. But such weightlessness did not make the Aurors panic. They turned around hard and tried to cast magic spells on Yeting to interrupt him. However, because they were in the air and had nowhere to use their strength, they were completely unable to change themselves. The direction and position had to be like a target, floating in place stupidly. At the same time, since they cannot turn around, the angle at which they can use magic spells is limited, which greatly reduces the number of magic spells that can attack Yeting at the same time. "Now, I am surrounding you." Yeting glanced at the Aurors arrogantly, and then began to walk around them. As he walked, he shot the stun spell at the Aurors, and the Aurors who could not move were stunned. Like targets hanging in the air, they had to use the iron armor curse to resist the attack, but they would lose if they defended for a long time. In the end, they could only watch each other being knocked unconscious by Yeting and falling to the ground. Some Aurors are still struggling. He can constantly try to use various magic spells on Yeting, but because he cannot form a volley and the firepower density is too low, these magic spells are completely unable to hit the agile yet. It was as if he was walking in a hail of bullets. Yeting just adjusted his movement speed, and the attacks of the Aurors passed him by. When encountering certain spells that are difficult to avoid, his body will feel as if it has suddenly fast-forwarded, exploding several times faster in a short period of time, causing all the spells to fail. In less than 10 minutes, these targets were shot down one by one, leaving only Prout sitting on the ground with a dull look on his face. He couldn't believe it at all. Dozens of well-trained Wei-Luo were shot down like this. At the age of 14, all the boys at Hogwarts were defeated. In the battle just now, the magic used by the boy in front of him opened his eyes. First, he moved in space like a phantom, and then controlled them with a spell similar to a floating spell. Then he used a magic spell while dodging the attack. Probably the magic of time. This is a true master of magic. How could the minister provoke such a person? Yeting nodded with satisfaction, and then with a move of his left hand, all the wands on the floor flew into his hand. With a little force, all the wands broke off, leaving only Plot's wand intact. In his hands. Yeting looked at the unconscious Auror lying on the floor, threw all the fragments of the wand over, and then used Prout's wand to perform a delicate shape-shifting on the fragments. The fragments of the wand immediately turned into hemp ropes. All the other unconscious Aurors were tied up and hung from the ceiling. Finally, he looked at Deli Wong again. This Auror. He was the one who took the lead in this conflict, and it was he who started the trouble again after being let off by him again. How can you let such a person go? So Yeting performed a complex shape-shifting spell on him, turning it into a small leprous toad, cast a forgetting spell on him, and then went to the bathroom of the Ministry of Magic and flushed the leprosy toad into the toilet. In this way, King Deli will live in the sewer with a new identity. Due to the forgetting curse, he will only have the memories after he became the leprous toad in the future. In this case, even if Delis is found by the Ministry of Magic in the complex London sewers, or the shape-shifting spell on his body disappears and returns to his original form, he will only think of yourself as a real leprosy toad. Chapter 142. Okay, you're done. Yeting clapped his hands with satisfaction, then looked at Plot. How about it, do you still want to arrest me? Or confiscate my magic props? This. Prout looked at the aurors hanging from the ceiling and buried in the ground with only their heads exposed, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. This scene was like a slap, hitting the aurors hard. The office was completely insulting to the aurors. When other people came here, the auror office was completely disgraced. However, they can't retaliate yet. Firstly, the reason is in the other party's hands. After all, they have always done the confiscation themselves. Secondly, the other party is too strong and they really can't afford to offend him. Forget it, you can take the magic items yourself. Anyway, confiscating the wand and magic items of an unconvicted necromancer is against the rules. Really? You know the current situation. Yeting patted his shoulder and said, I'll let you go this time. You should be lucky. For Dumbledore's sake, I didn't use animagus. Animagus, 04. Thinking of this, Plot couldn't help but break into a cold sweat again. This boy is the first magical creature animagus in history, seemingly a dragon. With his ability, if he really transforms into a dragon, he just needs to breathe a few puffs of dragon breath or move his minions, and they will have to explain everything here. It's really untouchable. Well. Plot persuaded slowly, you'd better leave quickly. The elevator is burned out. If you don't hurry up, you will definitely be late. Don't worry about it. Also, I flushed Delis into the toilet. Go find it yourself. Yeting picked up his dragon skin bag from the ground, stuffed the sun disk and the bell into it, and walked in the direction of the elevator. In front of the elevator, he waved briefly with Prout's magic wand, and the completely burned elevator returned to its original state. Then, he pointed at several places, and the elevator was immediately ready for use. Plot was almost dumbfounded. He didn't understand why an elevator that had been burned like this could be restored to its original state. Sure enough, a true genius is omnipotent. He stared blankly at Yeting's disappearing figure, not even noticing that his wand was thrown to his feet. What happened today is something he will never forget in his life. Yeting walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the 9th floor. The elevator cannot go down that deep and can only reach the 9th floor at most. The courtroom on the 10th floor must be reached on foot. The elevator door slammed shut, and the elevator began to descend. After a while, the friction sound of the descent finally stopped, and a cold female voice sounded in the elevator, Department of Mysteries. The elevator door opened with a bang again. Yeting walked out of the elevator and came to a corridor. This corridor is completely different from the corridors above. The walls are empty, there are no doors or windows, but there is a simple black door at the end of the corridor, which is the Mysterious Affairs Hall. The Department of Mysteries is the department of the Ministry of Magic that conducts secret research into certain mysteries, including death, time, space, thought and love, and stores and preserves prophecy records. Most of its operations are kept completely secret from the general necromancer population. However, the main business of this department seems to be more like what scientists do, which is to reveal the sources and rules that govern the operation of magic. Yeting took a deep look at Hyman, and he swore that one day all the information here would belong to him. But now is not the time. Sooner or later, he will be able to fully control the Ministry of Magic, and then whether he can control the Ministry of Magic depends on his subsequent performance. His target was on the left side of the corridor, where there was a gap leading to a staircase that allowed him to go down to the house. Go down to the bottom of the stairs and walk along a corridor. This corridor is exactly the same as the corridors leading to Snape's underground classroom at Hogwarts, rough stone walls, with torches stuck on brackets. The doors they passed here were heavy wooden doors with iron latches and keyholes. At the end of the corridor, there is a gloomy black door with a large iron lock. This is the 10th courtroom of the Wisengamot. The Wisengamot is the highest court in the necromancer world. Its members are similar to the members of the necromancer and the jury in the court, and have great power. Yeting looked at the majestic door in front of him and smiled coldly. The real destination had finally arrived. The people behind the door were his goals when he came to the Ministry of Magic. He worked tirelessly and endured the impatience of being hushed by the aurors. Hogwarts took him to the Ministry of Magic and gave the Aurors a severe lesson in the hall, wasn't it just for now? However, before that, he was prepared to give these members of the Wizengamot and the bureaucrats of the Ministry of Magic a slap in the face. He took 2 steps back and tensed his legs. The next moment, diamond-like dragon scales grew on his legs and sharp claws were extended, but his upper body remained the same as before. This is his new technique, partial animagus, which can combine the power of a human and a dragon if used properly. The right leg with the dragon's power was suddenly swung, and there was a loud boom. The iron door was completely dented under the huge force, and the shafts on both sides were also broken. Immediately afterwards, the door crashed to the ground. Huge amounts of noise constantly echoed in the dark corridor, and Yeting stepped through the iron door and entered the trial room amidst such noise. The walls around the courtroom were made of black stone, and the light from the torches was dim and gloomy. On both sides of him were rows of empty benches that were gradually rising, and in front of him, on the highest benches, many dark figures suddenly appeared. The average person on trial will be under a lot of psychological pressure in this gloomy and dark atmosphere. This is the power that the Wizengamot exerts on the people on trial. At the moment, these 317 figures all looked in the direction of the door uniformly. Yeting stepped on the door panel, looked at these high-ranking people, and smiled contemptuously. "I'm sorry, the quality of this door is a bit poor." It fell down at the slightest touch. Everyone was stunned, and all the whispers stopped. Yeting's aggressive attack really scared them. But it's not over yet. The next moment, I just heard a snap of my fingers. On all the torches, the dull flames disappeared, replaced by golden sun-like flames, and the dazzling light instantly dispelled the haze in the courtroom. No one can hide in the darkness, and everyone in the courtroom can see it at a glance. There were about 100 people sitting on the surrounding benches. They were wearing purple robes with a delicate silver W embroidered on the left chest. They all looked down at him, some with stern expressions, while others did not hide their inner curiosity. In the middle of the row of benches in front sat the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. To his left sat a broad, square-jawed witch with short grey hair, a monocle, and a formidable expression. The seat to Fudge's right is empty, but it can be seen from the nameplate in front of the seat that this seat belongs to Dolores Umbridge, the high-level Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Magic. At the moment, that pink leprous toad should be staying in Saint Bavar. Chapter 143. Yeting's behavior left a deep impression on everyone present. The Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, was furious. He stood up and yelled at Yeting, "Ting Yet! What on earth are you doing? You have to know, this is the Wizengamot. You are here to be judged." "Really?" Yeting nodded indifferently, ignored his words, and asked instead, "So, where is my seat?" Before Fudge could speak, Dumbledore on the other side spoke, "Your seat is in the middle, sit down, kid." Dumbledore is the chief magician of the Wizengamot, and in this situation, he can speak at will. Yeting looked at the center of the trial room. It was a high-backed iron chair, with iron chains on the left and right on the armrests of the chair. These chains can suddenly jump up and tie the person sitting in the middle tightly. "Oh, this chair is so crude," Yeting muttered in a voice that everyone could hear. Then, he snapped his fingers again. The next moment, this iron chair also changed its appearance, turning into a luxurious boss chair with black leather, solid wood armrests and rotatable. Yeting sat on it, sinking his body deeply into the soft backrest, crossed his legs, and then pulled the armrest. The backrest immediately fell backwards. In this way, he was almost lying down. The necromancers of the Wizengamot were dumbfounded by Yeting's actions. He didn't look like a prisoner who came to stand trial at all. He looked like a leader who came to review. Yeting leaned on the boss's chair, leaning his elbow on the armrest to support his head. He turned his seat and looked around the entire courtroom. After thinking for a few seconds, Yeting spoke again. "I think the decoration here is too crude and has no taste at all." Just hearing the snap of the fingers, the entire courtroom immediately took on a new look. The walls of the courtroom were hung with thick ribbons of holly and mistletoe, the ceiling was covered with icicles that would never melt, and a Christmas tree was placed in the corner, decorated with various little knick-knacks, from shiny holly berries to a live, hooting golden owl, golden stars shining at the top of the tree, and 10 gift boxes at the base of the city tree. The most exaggerated thing is that a warm light snow fell from the ceiling, and the entire courtroom was filled with a Christmas atmosphere. The necromancers present were completely stunned. They could not believe that someone dared to do such a thing in the Wizengamot trial room, nor could they believe that someone's summoning spell, a branch of shape-shifting, could be so powerful as this. To the point where I was speechless for a moment. Unexpectedly, Dumbledore, who was sitting between them, also reminded him as if he was joking, "Great decoration, it reminds me of the Christmas dinner at Hogwarts, but in this way, our clothes are not very consistent. The atmosphere is great." Yeting thought for a second and nodded. "Professor Dumbledore is right, I didn't think enough about it." Then there was another snap of fingers and a pop sound. Immediately, the pointed necromancer hats of all Wizengamot members turned into soft red Santa hats. The red hats were paired with white fluffy edges and were worn on the heads of some very old necromancers, making them look like Santa Claus. A few necromancers curiously touched the white pom-poms hanging softly to their ears, looking very interested, but some people were still irritated, and a few necromancers threw their Santa hats on their faces angrily. On the ground. Others were so angry that they stood up and were about to say something to Yeting, but before they could react, Yeting spoke again. He said to himself, "Don't you ever provide refreshments to visitors? Is this the Wizengamot way of hospitality? It's really rude, but I'm different this time." There was another familiar snap of fingers, and the next moment, a cup of English black tea appeared in front of everyone. The exquisite bone china teacup was placed on a small saucer, and there was also a plate of exquisite snacks. Everyone's snacks were different. Same, mince pies, Christmas pastries, crunchy peanut flakes and the like. Definitely, Yeting did not forget to provide fresh milk and sugar cubes. The necromancers were speechless as they looked at the refreshments in front of them. They had begun to wonder if they had gone to the wrong place. They were probably not at an inquisition, but at a Christmas tea party. "0, please give me flowers." Cornelius Fudge was already so angry that he could not speak because he saw that among them, Dumbledore had taken the lead in enjoying the tea in front of him. He added fresh milk and sugar cubes to the black tea and stirred it. And then really picked up the black tea and tasted it carefully. After drinking it, he looked satisfied and recommended it to the necromancer next to him. Near Dumbledore, several necromancers began to taste black tea and snacks in the same way. Some people even chatted and exchanged snacks with each other, really looking like a tea party. And there are more than one or two such people. A quarter of the nearly 100 Wizengamot members began to chat happily while eating, and more people just poured and drank by themselves, not paying attention to this at all. Keep the trial in mind. 00 It's no wonder, in fact, the Dementors' invasion of Hogwarts made most necromancers dissatisfied. At least 1/3 of the members of the Wizengamot have children staying in Hogwarts at home. It can be said that without Yeting's timely action, their children may have been injured by the Dementors. Therefore, these people inherently owe Yeting a favor. Many other members of the Wizengamot also have good intentions or neutral stances towards Yeting. These are all due to Yeting's talent and strength. Let's not mention Yeting's academic achievements for the time being, just look at his awe. You can know from Nemagus and the Patroness charm that Yeting, who is only 14 years old, is actually a powerful necromancer. It is very easy to summon the Patroness necromancer in the Ministry of Magic and the Wizengamot. Achieve a high level, because this is a reflection of the level of magic. In fact, this trial was indeed a conspiracy against Yeting. Cornelius Fudge began to lean toward pure-blood families after alienating Dumbledore. This trial was a collaboration between him and these pure-blood families. Cornelius Fudge needed to suppress Dumbledore and establish his own authority, while pure-blood families the Blood faction hopes to change the current situation where Muggles and mixed-blood necromancers are getting stronger and stronger. Suppressing the Muggle-born Yeting is a good method. So they reached this cooperation with the support of the pure-blood faction and the group of neutral necromancers that Connolly has attracted. In fact, almost half of the Wizengamot members have already confirmed that they will side with the Ministry of Magic in this trial. Chapter 144. After understanding the conspiracy behind the trial, the purpose of Yeting's series of actions after entering the trial court became clear. After Yeting entered the courtroom, he immediately gave them a blow. He snapped his fingers 5 times and used shape-shifting magic 5 times, turning the dark and depressing courtroom into a warm Christmas tea party scene. This powerful hand shape-shifting and wandless spell-casting abilities really terrify the necromancers of the Wizengamot. This is almost the same level of power as Dumbledore and the Demon King. And what is the concept of power at the same level as Dumbledore and the Dark Lord? First of all, with Yeting's ability to cast spells without a wand, don't expect the Aurors to catch him, even if he himself is waiting to be killed. Azkaban couldn't lock him down either, at least the Dementors would be frightened and run away if they saw him. And those who offended him should be worried. After all, the real young man in front of him, who can be called 217, is not as noble as Dumbledore. He may be very impulsive, so he voted in favor of the verdict. Everyone has to be at risk. If they are retaliated against, they have no ability to resist at all. Therefore, although Yeting's behavior slapped the Wizengamot in the face, it was also a warning. The necromancers present seemed to hear the boy saying coldly in their ears, "This is my power. So pay attention to your attitude later. If you offend me, what do you think will happen to you?" And Dumbledore's singing with Yeting on the trial bench was a clear support for Yeting. In front of such two powerful necromancers, all the opponents had to hesitation. Should I offend these two people at the same time? The answer is obvious. Although Cornelius Fudge and the Pureblood faction had been attracted in advance, facing such a young strongman and the veteran White Necromancer leader at the same time, almost all neutrals immediately gave up their original intentions. Instead, they moved closer to Yeting and Dumbledore, and they expressed their attitudes by enjoying the refreshments arranged by Yeting. It has the feeling of after drinking this bowl of wine, you are one of our own, like a big shot in the world. Needless to say, those necromancers who were originally on Yeting's side wished that this trial would turn into a farce. Even some pureblood necromancers were frightened by Yeting's move, and they also began to hesitate. Is this plan too rash? They may have kicked themselves on the iron plate. However, Cornelius Fudge did not notice the change in the situation for the time being. He suppressed his blush and suppressed his anger and announced loudly, "The defendant is finally here, let's get started. Are you ready?" This sentence was said towards his end of the bench. "Yes, sir," his assistant answered. "The trial on November 20th, Fudge said in a booming voice, is the trial of Ting Yip, a third-year student in the Ravenclaw branch of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, for violating the rules on the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch on November 11. Cases concerning the protection of public servants of the Ministry of Magic Act and the Azkaban Public Servants Act." Interrogators: Cornelius Oswald Fudge, Minister for Magic; Amelia Susan Bones, Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement; Dolores Jane Umbridge, High-Level Under-Secretary, absent. Trial Recorder: Robin Boy Lopez Butler. Defense Witnesses: none. Hearing this, Dumbledore stood up in the trial seat and interrupted coldly, "Defense witnesses, all Hogwarts teachers and students, Plenipotentiary Albus Percival Wolver Rick Brian Dumbledore." Dumbledore's words immediately choked Fudge. He opened his mouth feebly, trying to point out that witnesses could not entrust others to be present, but in the end he did not say it. "Yes," Fudge said, moving the papers in front of him awkwardly, "okay then. Now, the charges." "Yes." He pulled out a piece of parchment from a pile of documents, took a deep breath, and read aloud, "The defendant is accused of the following crimes." The defendant had previously received a written warning from the Ministry of Magic for similar accusations, and this time he was fully aware that he was when the act was illegal. He deliberately and knowingly cast a divine guard on the Quidditch pitch of Hogwarts at 5:27 p.m. on November 11 in front of all the teachers and students of the school. Curse, and attacked the Dementors in Azkaban who were tasked with patrolling Hogwarts, killing a total of 18 Dementors, and seriously injured 7 of them, forcing them to carry out a long-term operation. More than 2 months of training. This behavior violates paragraph 24 of paragraph 5 of the Protection of Public Servants of the Ministry of Magic Act of 1967 and paragraph 7 of the Azkaban Public Servants Act of 1844. 21. You are a third-year student of the Ravenclaw branch of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Jian Fudge asked, glaring at Jian from the parchment list. Yes. Yeting said calmly. You were officially warned by the Ministry of Magic 2 months ago for using magic to attack and harm Dementors, right? That's right. Do you know that the Dementors you harmed are employees of the Ministry of Magic and are employed in Azkaban? That's right. Did you know that the person you attacked was performing official duties for the Ministry of Magic at the time? That's right. At this time, the witch wearing a monocle interrupted Fudge with a loud and deep voice. You transformed into a fully grown patroness. That's right. Did your patroness really hurt the Dementors? That's right. Your patroness is a dragon? And this patroness has hurt and even killed Dementors more than once. Yes, it burned the Dementors to death with its breath. Yeji was a little impatient. Last question, the witch looked at him with a strange look, are you only 14 years old? Yes, Yeting frowned and said 3.3, my birthday is in June. It's amazing that you actually invented a magic that can harm Dementors, Ms. Bones looked at him and said in admiration, "No one has ever been able to harm Dementors. You are the first to do this. A little bit of people, and only 14 years old, there are still many of us who can't even summon a patron saint." The necromancers around her began to whisper to each other again. Some nodded and drank tea again, while others looked displeased and shook their heads. "This is not a question of how amazing the magic is," Fudge said in an annoyed voice. "In fact, I think the more amazing it is, the worse it is, because the child is using magic to harm the staff of the Ministry of Magic. He is not here to do it. To be praised by you, but to be judged." Chapter 145. After hearing Cornelius Fudge's words, Yeting, who seemed impatient due to boring questions, suddenly broke out. "Being judged?" He stood up from his seat and glanced at the surrounding necromancers with an arrogant and indifferent look. "Do you really think that I am here to be judged?" At this moment, heavy pressure fell on everyone, cold sweat began to flow down constantly, panic, fear and despair began to engulf their hearts, leaving them breathless. At this moment, they no longer felt that they were a glorious member of the Wisengamot, but just a helpless little animal being targeted by natural enemies. It's Long Wei. Although he did not transform into dragon, the dragon power released by Yeting still put great mental pressure on the necromancers present. Everyone showed their composure under this dragon power. Only Dumbledore could maintain his original state. Demeanor. But in fact, even Dumbledore himself was shocked in his heart, because the huge momentum just now almost overwhelmed him, which neither Voldemort nor Grindelwald had ever experienced. Looking at the trembling necromancers in front of him, Yeting nodded with satisfaction and put away his dragon power. The next moment, the necromancers were staggering around as if they had been granted amnesty, especially Fudge himself, who lay on the table and gulped. He was breathing heavily, and the blow just now almost completely suffocated him. Even facing Voldemort could not put such great pressure on them. They even thought for a moment that the boy in front of them would suddenly turn into a dragon and devour everyone present. From this moment on, everyone looked at Yeting with respect, reverence, fear. No one dared to regard him as a 14-year-old boy. Yeting returned to his chair, leaned lazily on the backrest, crossed his legs, and continued to say to Fudge, "I'm not here to accept any trial. On the contrary, I'm here to hold you accountable. The Ministry of Magic claims to be able to controlling the Dementors, but allowing them to enter Hogwarts, almost causing serious consequences. I need the Ministry of Magic to give me a reasonable explanation for this matter, otherwise, this matter will not be so simple. It's over." His tone was very calm, as if he was just telling something trivial, but the words he spoke made Fudge feel extremely sad, because the person in front of him didn't take him seriously at all. He was provoking him, the Minister of Magic. Provoked the entire Ministry of Magic. Fudge wanted to get angry, wanted to sternly accuse the boy in front of him, and wanted to make an impassioned statement that the Ministry of Magic would never be threatened, but when the words came to his lips, he subconsciously stopped and looked. The scene just now left a deep impression on him, the huge amounts of suffocating psychological pressure are still echoing repeatedly in his heart. So, all he said was dry justification. That was just an accident. The Ministry of Magic was still able to maintain control of the Dementors. However, this stammering defense seemed quite weak. Even Fudge's supporters couldn't help but look at him with disappointment. Perhaps he was irritated by his cowardly performance, or perhaps he was stimulated by these looks of contempt or disappointment, so Fudge burst out. That's enough, that's enough. Fudge said, forcing his face to show an arrogant expression, I'm sorry for interrupting him, I think we should continue today's trial. Rather than one at this time, there were footsteps at the door of the trial room, and an aura ran in a panic. When he saw Yeting sitting in the center, he clearly showed a fearful expression, but even so, he bravely ran to Cornelius Fudge. Fudge seemed very impatient for his speech to be interrupted, but after listening to the aura's whisper, his expression immediately became surprised. He looked at Yeting fiercely and showed a malicious smile. My respected wizards and witches, the aura suddenly said loudly after he retreated, I have just received news that the hall of our Ministry of Magic has been destroyed. The news caused an outcry. Fudge was quite satisfied with this reaction. He continued, just now, our Ministry of Magic hall was completely destroyed by a fire, including our fountains, our proud statues, all fireplaces and elevators. Everything was destroyed, and the culprit was the man in front of me. His finger pointed at Yeting in the center. Led by our respected high-level Undersecretary Ms. Dolores Umbridge, Dozens of brave Aurors were burned while fighting the fire, he said loudly in an impassioned tone. More than 20 Aurors suffered huge amounts of injuries in the process of fighting against the arsonists. Our heroic Aurors were knocked unconscious on the spot by the heinous criminals. Some were buried in the ground, and some were killed. It was hung on the ceiling, and even one Auror was shape-shifted. In short, he was treated cruelly. His words changed and became severe. The boy in front of you is not only a suspect in attacking Ministry of Magic staff, but now also an arsonist and a thug. I have reason to speculate that he is plotting to overthrow the Ministry of Magic. My respected male and female necromancers, the person fighting in front of us may very well be the future Dark Lord. We must judge him before he causes any greater harm. Fudge's speech really surprised everyone. The burning of the lobby of the Ministry of Magic was something no one expected. Many necromancers began to whisper and some of them looked at Yeting with a somewhat unkind look. Fuji looked at Yeting with some pride and announced, "Now, we are going to conduct a new round of trial on you. You will not deny everything I just said." Suddenly, his roar stopped abruptly, and he closed his mouth tightly. Although the muscles on his face were constantly moving, he was still unable to make any sound. Even his face and thick neck were suppressed red. "It's really ugly." Yeting's cold voice interrupted all discussions, shifting your responsibilities onto others. "Is this how your Ministry of Magic works? Confiscate the wand of a necromancer who has not been convicted, and ask for after searching my personal belongings, taking away my alchemy tools, mishandling the alchemy tools, and then blaming me for an accident. Is the Ministry of Magic such an ugly and corrupt institution?" Chapter 146. After saying this, the necromancers of the Wizengamot immediately cast suspicious eyes on Fudge. Fudge's gag spell had been lifted. He glared at Yeting and said loudly, "This is a slander, a naked slander against the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry of Magic has always acted in strict accordance with rules and regulations. This is purely his lie. Have your wand and alchemy tools been confiscated?" Ms. Bones asked Yeting, her tone full of surprise. "The Ministry of Magic has no such regulations. I don't understand. Don't you understand, Amelia?" Fudge interrupted loudly, "Let me explain." He took great pains to discover that the Ministry's mistakes could be used as a wonderful excuse. It was indeed a wonderful excuse. Everyone present, all the Aurors were either burned or knocked unconscious, and they were all sent to St. Mungo's Hospital of Magic. No one could come to expose his lies. "Ah, yes," Yeting nodded lightly, "it is true that everyone is at St. Mungo's, but I remember that there is an Auror named Proud who is still unscathed. Why don't we let him come? How about we talk about what the truth of it all is?" Proud. When he said this name, Fudge's face immediately turned ugly. From what the Auror just said, he already knew that if Proud was summoned by the tribunal, he would never talk to him. Cooperating. What if Proud insisted on telling the truth after being summoned? Wouldn't he be asking for trouble? "Enough, enough," Fudge said rudely. "Who can guarantee that Proud is not with you? I'm sure you two have carefully arranged a lie." However, the Wizengamot looked at Fudge with even more suspicion. Many of them knew Proud and knew him very well. They believed that according to Plot's character, he would never do anything to collude with outsiders. They have begun to suspect something fishy. Dumbledore cleared his throat. The Wizengamot was quiet again. "I think it is possible for some employees in the Ministry of Magic to do such a thing," he said with a smile. "After all, this is not the first time that the Ministry of Magic has been unable to control its employees. The Dementor attack at Hogwarts illustrates this point well, and I have reason to believe that some Ministry of Magic employees would violate Ministry rules and regulations by doing something like that to one of my students. Eve, come." "Ah, Dumbledore, even you can't make such an accusation against the Ministry of Magic," Cornelius Fudge said angrily. "You don't have any evidence that—" "Oh? Evidence?" Yeting interrupted Fuji again. "If you want evidence, I will give you evidence." He pointed a finger at his head, and then slowly pulled out some silvery substance from his brain, which was both liquid and gas like clouds. "That's his memory." Yeting muttered something, and then he snapped his fingers. In an instant, all the necromancers noticed that the scene around them had changed. They were no longer sitting in a courtroom dressed up as a Christmas tea party, but in the noisy hall of the Ministry of Magic. "This is—" Dumbledore looked at Yeting and asked. "This is the scene I remember." This shocked the Wizengamot. They had all heard of the precious magic item Pensieve, and they also knew that the Pensieve could allow people to observe memories from a third-person perspective, but they had never heard of it. This can be done with magic spells, and it can be done without a wand. Congratulations, Mr. Yat, Dumbledore praised, you have created another great curse. Professor Flitwick will be proud of you. Yeting smiled and nodded. Now, everyone seemed to be in a lobby where people were coming and going. They saw necromancers passing by them in a hurry, going in and out of the fireplace, but when they stretched out their hands, they found that they could not touch these people at all. Hey, I saw Mrs. Akmar in the elevator. A necromancer said to others with interest. There is also Professor Phoebus Penrose of the Ministry of Magic's Investigation Committee. He actually left secretly during working hours, but my mother discovered it. Another person joked as if he had discovered a huge secret. Soon, their attention was attracted by what happened next. They saw Rufus Scrimgeour leading the Aurors to escort Yeting over, but they were stopped by the security personnel of the Ministry of Magic. Immediately afterwards, the security inspector took away Yeting's wand after inspecting him. I remember that security inspectors can only check visitors and issue certificates, right? Dumbledore asked Fudge seriously, they have no right to take away the necromancer's wand, right? This is impossible. Fudge explained loudly, this is fake, this is just an illusion he forged. However, no one believed his pale explanation. The scene in front of him was much more real than his words. There was no possibility of forgery in such a specific scene. Next, they saw the pink leprous toad Umbridge leading the Aurors to stop the Aurors and Yeting. After Umbridge announced her authorized order, Scrimgeour left angrily. What followed was a series of actions by Umbridge to make things difficult for Yeting. Oh, it turns out that Mr. Minister's so-called temporary dispatch of Ms. Umbridge to pick up Mr. Ye was just to do these things. A voice in the Wizengamot said in a sinister tone. Fudge felt even more embarrassed. If a door key appeared in front of him now, he would definitely touch it. At the same time, he secretly hated Umbridge and Yeting. He hated Umbridge for actually making things so obvious to Yeting, and it was more than enough success. He hated Yeting because he actually exposed all this embarrassing thing to so many people. Next comes the important scene. First, Umbridge made a mistake in operating the silent bell, which caused a riot. Later, she tried to take away the broomstick but failed to resist, causing huge amounts of fire. That one just now was really a flying broomstick, someone asked suddenly. Before Yeting could speak, Dumbledore answered for him. I can prove that this is indeed Mr. Ye's broomstick, he said with a smile. This is not only his car, but also his alchemy work. He once rode this broom to dominate our school for 2 consecutive semesters. Quidditch Cup. But I didn't expect that this broomstick could have such a function. His words elicited a gasp of amazement. But as the fire spread, the terrifying heat of the golden flames made their eyes change when they looked at Yeting. Being able to create such a powerful flying broomstick showed that his alchemy skills were no less than Dumbledore's, and perhaps only the best. Nicholas Flamel could surpass him. Chapter 147. The next scene was Yeting fighting against more than 20 Aurors. In full view of the Wizengamot, Yeting subdued all the enemies with his bare hands at the beginning. During this period, whether it was his novel self-created spells or his superb skills, everyone was speechless. It wasn't until Yeting entered the elevator that this memory came to an end and the scene was frozen. Everyone felt another scene change like a space shift, and then they found themselves back in the courtroom, with the black tea and snacks in front of them still quietly placed on the table. The scene was silent, and everyone was immersed in the shocking scene just now, until a witch spoke first. That, was time accelerated just now, she asked Yeting excitedly, looking very interested. Her words seemed to have opened a burning pot, and the courtroom immediately began to boil. What a wonderful iron armor curse! This level is destined to win the championship in a duel competition. That's a large-scale floating spell, isn't it? How can it still be used like this? Apparition can still be used in this way? Isn't he afraid of accidents? There are also accusations against the Ministry of Magic. What the hell is going on with that deluxe? Dozens of Aurors were taken down so quickly. Actually casting a curse on an underage necromancer. The Ministry of Magic really needs to be rectified. Shifting your responsibilities to others. The words of the Wizengamots were like sharp arrows, piercing Cornelius Fudge's heart one after another. At this time, his face was pale and he had nothing to say. He understood that all his calculations and conspiracies were not only useless, but also became a weapon for others to attack him. Ahem. Yeting cleared his throat, and the courtroom instantly became quiet. So, Mr. Cornelius Fudge. Yeting spoke, what else do you have to say now? Do you still think my words are lies? These are all your fantasies, Fudge defended with sweating profusely. Yes, these are all just your imagination, a member of the Ministry of Magic. Why are your wands and alchemy tools illegally confiscated? They are all very rule-abiding people, especially Ms. Dolores Umbridge. She will not do anything that violates the rules of the Ministry of Magic. She is of no good and will make people talk, unless she is crazy, but the possibility is definitely very small, even Bagman will not place a bet. Oh, I don't think any of us will believe that it's a coincidence that they did this. Yeting said softly. What does this mean? Fudge asked, wiping his sweat. It means I think someone sent them there. Yeting said. I think if someone ordered Umbridge to confiscate a necromancer's personal belongings, the Ministry of Magic would have a record of it. Fudge yelled harshly. If she accepted private instructions from someone in the Ministry of Magic, then that's not necessarily true. Yeting said calmly, my meaning is very clear, Connolly. What, you mean? Fuji looked at Yeting in disbelief. Yes, I think that Leprosy Toad did this just after accepting your instructions, right? Yeting asked forcefully. No. You asked her to embarrass me just to prevent me from responding correctly when facing the trial, right? Your purpose is to prove my guilt and show your authority, right? He. Perhaps you still support some pure-bloodists and want to suppress me to promote pure-bloodism, right? No. I didn't think so. Cornelius Fudge almost collapsed as Yeting explained his plan and his inner thoughts step by step. This is not mine. The decision. This is Ms. Umbridge's private act. Yes, it is her private act. Oh, private behavior. Yeting glanced at Fudge coldly. This man could only reach this level. After expelling Umbridge in order to suppress himself and Dumbledore, he also took out Umbridge for his own position. Umbridge was thrown out and became his scapegoat. But that doesn't matter. For Fudge, such behavior is just slow suicide. As a leader, if he betrays his most capable and closest subordinate, who else is willing to work for him? Coupled with his inability to control the Dementors and his poor performance today, and even his inability to capture Sirius, his resignation from the position of Minister of Magic is a certainty. 0-0 But let's not talk about this for the moment. Yeting is ready to launch the final blow to him. I just said it. Yeting said, I came here to ask the Ministry of Magic to give me an explanation about the Dementors' invasion of Hogwarts. But now it seems that more needs to be added. As you just saw, employees of the Ministry of Magic made a series of embarrassments and insults to me. Well, give me your answers. Yeting, in his private capacity, publicly threatened the Wizengamot to impose a verdict. This was indeed a great insult to the Wizengamot. However, due to Yeting's series of displays of strength just now, including eliminations and beatings, the entire Wizengamot Gamo had no choice but to take advantage of his power and give him an explanation by approving the Ministry of Magic. 0 The necromancers in the courtroom were silent, not knowing how to respond to Yeting's request. Finally, Ms. Bones stood up again. So, let's start a new topic now. Mr. Ye accused the Ministry of Magic of making a mistake in its work, causing the Dementors to get out of control and enter Hogwarts, almost causing major harm, and making a huge mistake. Is this accusation correct? When she finished speaking, she looked at Yeting. Yeting smiled at her and nodded. No. Ms. Bones, Fudge shouted desperately, you can't. However, Bones ignored his opinion, looked around, and continued, anyone who agrees with the crime, please raise your hands. Yeting squinted his eyes and stared at the Wizengamots. Hands were raised one after another, a large number, and soon more than half of them were raised. Yeting nodded with satisfaction. Soon, Ms. Bones said, anyone who agrees that the accusation is not true, please raise your hand. Fudge raised his hand, and 6 or 7 other people raised their hands at the same time. The others looked indifferent. Some wanted to raise their hands, but put them down under Yeting's gaze. Fudge looked around at everyone, and it seemed that a large piece of matter was stuck in his throat. Then he put his hand down, took 2 deep breaths, and said, very good, the accusation has been established. It is unprecedented. Wizenga was actually RD by a private person. Manipulated. However, everything was not over yet. Soon, Ms. Bones read out Yeting's second accusation. This time, there were many more necromancers who were in favor of the accusation, and there were almost no opponents. Chapter 148. Fudge has completely given up. He knows that he has lost this round. Who would have thought that the 14-year-old boy he wanted to use to scare the monkeys would be so powerful, defeating dozens of Aurors by himself, and turning the situation around in the Wisengamot trial in one fell swoop. At the moment, Ms. Bones looked at Fudge and announced in a business-like tone, according to the judgment of the Wisengamot, the Ministry of Magic will investigate the Dementors' invasion of Hogwarts on November 11th. The Ministry of Magic must take full responsibility for this major mistake. At the same time, the Ministry of Magic must take full responsibility for the incident in which staff violated the rights of visitors in the Ministry of Magic Hall on November 20th. The Ministry of Magic must take responsibility for the above incidents within 3 days. Punish the person and give the victim adequate compensation, above all. Understood, I will handle this matter. 590, Fudge said with a pale face. He knew that everything was a foregone conclusion and he could only choose to accept it. Very good. Yeting was quite satisfied with this ending. He looked at Fudge and said calmly, I will wait for the Ministry of Magic's solution. As for everyone in the Wisengamot, Yeting turned his attention to all the necromancers present. All the necromancers he glanced at were trembling. I am very satisfied with today's trial. I hope to have the opportunity to compete with you in the future. You have further cooperation. When he said the last sentence, he looked at Amelia Bones and nodded to her. He believed that the other party also understood what he meant. After saying this, he snapped his fingers. Here comes the wand. After about 10 seconds, a purple wand flew in from outside the gate and fell into Yeting's hand. It seemed that it had gone through a long journey. This flying spell caused a few more exclamations. Yeting looked at Dumbledore and nodded to him, Professor, I'm going back to Hogwarts first. Then with a roll of cloak, the whole person flickered and disappeared in place. As soon as Yeting left, the atmosphere at the scene immediately relaxed a lot. The necromancers of the Wisengamot finally no longer had to face the threat of such a powerful necromancer with amazing potential, which made them feel extremely relaxed. Dumbledore, your student is really young and promising. An old necromancer said with a complicated expression. Yes, there will probably be another character like you in the necromancer world. Another which side? No, he will not become like me. Dumbledore shook his head and sighed, I am a Gryffindor, and he is a typical Ravenclaw. He pursues it from beginning to end. All he has is knowledge and wisdom, and he doesn't care much about justice and evil. Just like his animagus, he is a powerful dragon, but he is always sleeping. Do you remember the school motto of Hogwarts? Don't wake the dragon from his sleep. His world is very small. As long as you don't provoke him or the people around him, dragon will not be awakened. Therefore, even Voldemort can get along with him peacefully, but we should be fortunate that there are indeed a few people who care, and. He raised his eyebrows and said happily, besides, Indimo did provoke him. After saying that, he stood up and quickly walked out of the courtroom. 3 days later, the Ministry of Magic released new news, shocking all necromancers and media in the necromancer world. The Ministry of Magic has publicly admitted that the previous Dementor invasion incident at Hogwarts was a major mistake by the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry of Magic is willing to apologize and compensate, pay for the medical expenses of the injured, and not pay for the mental losses of all students. In addition, the 4 Hogwarts students who protected all teachers and students from the Dementors will also be awarded the 3rd level Order of Merlin. In addition, the Ministry of Magic also mentioned that on November 20th, the staff of the Ministry of Magic violated the rights of visitors at the Ministry of Magic because they used their privileges privately. We hereby publicly apologize to the victims and punish those responsible. Among them, the main responsible persons Ms. Dolores Umbridge was removed from all public offices, and she was tried in the Wisengamot. According to the results of the trial, Ms. Umbridge was sentenced to 10 years in Azkaban and fined. Definitely, everyone knows that the consequences of staying in Azkaban for 10 years are probably to become a student. The other second person responsible, the leader of the Auror team, Warren Dellis, was sentenced to 3 years in Azkaban and fined. Definitely executed after finding him in the sewers. The remaining responsible persons were punished internally, and the victim XX, the specific name was not reported here, will receive a huge compensation of 20,000 gold galleons. The media all exclaimed that the Ministry of Magic had uncharacteristically devalued itself this time, and there was some insider incident. However, Although the media are working tirelessly to dig out deeper facts, the Wizengamot has been very secretive about the trial on November 20. After all, no one wants to let people know how the Wizengamot was threatened. Yeting is basically satisfied with the result of this process, and his 3 female friends will definitely be extremely moved by this. But in this incident, his real gain was not here. In fact, Yeting wanted something from the Ministry of Magic, and that was the secrets of the Department of Mysteries of the Ministry of Magic. In fact, the true secrets of magic in the world of Harry Potter are all studied by the Department of Mysteries. However, the Department of Mysteries has long been committed to mysticism. The necromancers who work in the Department of Mysteries are called silent people because their work is highly confidential. Except for their internal personnel, only the Minister of Magic can view some of these research materials. Have the right to view. Definitely, Yeting doesn't want to be a minister, but he can support a minister. If you want to become a minister, you need the support of the Wizengamot. But politicians have always been afraid of power and not ethical, so Yeting came up with this plan. In this incident, the reason why he agreed to go to the Ministry of Magic was because it was a good opportunity to spread his influence in the necromancer world. Sure enough, in the halls of the Ministry of Magic and the Judgment Room 2.0, he successfully used his power to frighten most members of the Wizengamot, leaving a deep impression on them, and becoming the second most powerful person in their hearts. The strongest of Dumbledore and Voldemort, and due to his age, his status in their minds may be even higher. And having such an impression would facilitate his further intervention in the Ministry of Magic. In addition, under his intimidation, Fudge's conspiracy was successfully bankrupt. There was definitely the factor that he was relatively innocent, but the more reason was that he originally had strong power, coupled with Dumbledore's support. The Wizengamot made the right call. And after this failure, Fudge's approval rating will drop significantly. As long as he makes a few moves, he may be ousted from the position of Minister of Magic. Chapter 149. Another achievement was to get to know Ms. Amelia Susan Bones, Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement of the Ministry of Magic. She is a powerful person in the Ministry of Magic, second only to Fudge. She is a fair and honest person. People. She had a deep hatred for Voldemort. Her brother Edgar Bones had sacrificed his life the last time Voldemort came to power. Such a person is expected to replace Fudge as Minister of Magic. Yeting is ready to reach a secret cooperation with her, support her to become the Minister of Magic, and use her to control the Ministry of Magic and obtain the secrets of the Department of Mysteries. Before this trial, it would have been completely impossible for Yeting to have any political cooperation with Bones. After all, at that time, he was just a young man with outstanding academic achievements. Although he had a high reputation, but the political influence is insufficient. But now, things are different. Yeting, who single-handedly forced the entire Wizengamot to compromise, has become a powerful force that cannot be ignored in the magic world. He is enough to become Bones's collaborator, no, someone to rely on, because in the process of cooperation, he is the stronger one, and Bones cannot do without Yeting Xiang's help if he wants to avenge his brother. Then the plan became obvious. The final time for 04 to launch the plan will be next year, or the next school year. In the original work, Hogwarts held the Triwizard Tournament in the next school year, and Voldemort's Death Eaters set a trap during the Triwizard Tournament, waiting for an opportunity to teleport Harry Potter to a cemetery, where he resurrected Voldemort. As the Minister of Magic who came to power after Voldemort's defeat, Cornelius Fudge has always been afraid of Voldemort. In the original work, his reaction to Voldemort was to evade and refuse to admit it. Instead, he regarded the Order of the Phoenix who pointed out this fact and advocated against Voldemort as his great enemy. In the end, due to his laissez-faire, Death Eaters were raging everywhere in the wizarding world, which caused a lot of dissatisfaction among the necromancers against him, and he was eventually ousted from the minister's throne. In the original work, he was replaced by Scrimgeour, the chief of the Aura office. Ms. Bones is exactly the opposite of Fudge. When it comes to fighting Voldemort, she has always been a hawk in the Ministry of Magic, advocating a tough response to Voldemort rather than denying his existence. Unfortunately, in the original work, Ms. Bones was killed by Voldemort and did not develop her talents. This is Yeting's plan. He will take the lead in the fight against Voldemort, while Ms. Bones will serve as Fudge's opponent in the Ministry of Magic, publicizing the fact that Voldemort has returned, and advocating a tough fight against Voldemort. With Ms. Bones and Fudge confronting each other head-on, the Ministry of Magic will never be able to completely block the information about Voldemort's return under Fudge's unbridled chaos like in the original book. The return of the Dark Lord will definitely cause panic in the necromancer world. This kind of panic is exactly what Yeting needs, because at this time, the necromancer world will be eager for a hero to appear. Their first choice was definitely Dumbledore, the leader of the White Necromancers. However, Dumbledore's way of dealing with Voldemort was quite passive and passive. He attempted to solve Voldemort through the prophesied method. This is Yeting's opportunity. Because Dumbledore didn't take action, he could. Yeting already has considerable influence in the Wizengamot. As long as Yeting can openly confront Voldemort, he can gain real popularity in the necromancer world through the Wizengamot and become the savior of the necromancer world. At this time, Bones, who advocates fighting Voldemort, will also become a strong contender for the position of Minister of Magic. As long as he supports Ms. Bones, she can overthrow Fudge and become the new Minister of Magic. If the plan goes well, after he defeats Voldemort, his reputation will reach its peak. He will be able to replace Dumbledore and become the leader of the necromancer world, and Ms. Bones will be able to secure the position of Minister. By that time, whether Yeting wants to control the Ministry of Magic or enter the Department of Mysteries to view information, does the entire Ministry of Magic still allow him to take whatever he wants? This is definitely possible. The original Dumbledore was like this. As the leader of the White Necromancers, he was elected to be the Minister of Magic several times. It was only because of his own refusal that he was given the opportunity to Fudge, and Fudge had almost no chance when he first took office. Dumbledore must be consulted on everything. As long as Dumbledore is willing, the Ministry of Magic can basically become his back garden. The only thing that prevented this from happening was Dumbledore's original character. His nobility prevented him from doing this. But Yeting would not be as aloof as him. Definitely, at the moment Voldemort didn't know that his future destiny had been determined before he was resurrected, and he became a stepping stone for others to gain reputation. Putting aside Yeting's plan for the time being, after returning to Hogwarts, he was immediately treated like a hero. Teachers and students gathered around him to inquire about his treatment at the Ministry of Magic. After learning about Yeting, everyone breathed a sigh of relief after not being held accountable. In addition, the attitude of the three girls towards Yeting has become much gentler, because the reason why Yeting was tried by the Wizengamot was largely the responsibility of the three of them. On the third day, when the Ministry of Magic issued an announcement, everyone's eyes changed when they looked at Yeting. They didn't know what happened that day, but they knew that in that trial, Yeting not only cleared his name, but also made the Ministry of Magic personally admit his responsibility. In addition, he also obtained mental compensation for the students. Although it was only a gold galleons, it represented a compromise by the Ministry of Magic. The three girls were even more excited. They looked at Yeting with gratitude because they knew that Yeting had won this medal for them. Sir Merlin's medal was not a small honor in the necromancer world. Even a third-level medal means great merit and recognition from the entire necromancer world, not to mention that even the patron saint curses Yetingke. The status of the three girls as influential figures in Hogwarts has been further confirmed. Pinello 523 has not yet taken the N.E.W.T exam, and several departments in the Ministry of Magic have already sent her letters inviting her to join their departments after graduation. Zhongqiu has reserved the position of Prefect of Ravenclaw in advance. As soon as she reaches 5th grade in the next semester, she can become the new prefect. No one objects to this. Everyone felt that she deserved the title, and she herself began to become more and more confident. As for Hermione, her life has changed the most. She is no longer the boring nerd that people thought she was before. In the past, girls thought she was boring and unsociable, but now, the original nerd and boredom has turned into knowledgeable and individual. There are already several junior students. Girls began to gather around her and imitate her every move. She felt quite uncomfortable with this, but she also began to learn to cope with the social life among girls. In addition, there is another change that makes Yeting very happy, that is, Hermione finally gave up the time turner, but not because Yeting thought she collapsed due to pressure, but because she received too much attention. These attentions made it impossible for her to find an uninhabited corner to use the time turner, which greatly increased the risk of use. Therefore, Hermione, who was tired during the mealtime, stopped such behavior. As a price, she cancelled the 2 elective courses Muggle Behavioral Studies and Divination. In short, this incident changed everyone. Chapter 150. Since the turmoil in this Quidditch match was successfully resolved, the next Quidditch match can start smoothly. The little necromancers no longer have to worry about Dementors, not because of a promise from the Ministry of Magic, but because they have a few amazing classmates who can protect them with the Patroness charm. The two sides of this game were Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. Since Ravenclaw Yeting had announced his withdrawal from the team before this, the other colleges were greatly inspired. Yeting's existence is like a big mountain in front of them. Such a player who can completely crush them in the four aspects of technology, physical fitness, tactical level, and broomstick performance makes it almost impossible for them to defeat Raven. In line with Law's wish, the annual Quidditch game has become a 14-person game, a game in which Ravenclaw wins. Now, the mountains in front of them have finally disappeared, and each academy has regained hope of winning the championship, which gives them a little more motivation during training. Especially in this game, the Hufflepuff team looked very energetic when facing Ravenclaw. But Gryffindor hopes that Ravenclaw can teach Hufflepuff a lesson. Gryffindor lost to Hufflepuff in the previous game, and as long as Ravenclaw defeats Hufflepuff, oddly, they have hope of winning the championship. The result of the game was exactly what they expected. Ravenclaw defeated Hufflepuff. However, the Gryffindor players were not as happy as they imagined. Because they discovered that after Yeting left the team, another super new star emerged in Ravenclaw, Seeker Zhongqiu. This girl, who originally had only a slight ability, performed completely differently in the game than before. With her superior broomstick and her superb flight skills, she caught the golden snitch in just 10 minutes. In the competition, Hufflepuff's Godric Diggory was shown nowhere to go. At the moment, Gryffindor has to face the fact that its overall strength is lower than that of Ravenclaw, and its seeker Harry Potter has lost his broomstick and can only ride the old-fashioned 6-star sweeping star against Zhongqiu. The situation is truly desperate. However, at Christmas time, a surprise came to Gryffindor. Before a Ravenclaw Quidditch training, Roger made a mysterious announcement. I heard that Harry Potter of Gryffindor received a special Christmas gift, a firebolt. Roger said to all the players in the Quidditch locker room, definitely including Yeting, although he quit the team, he still has to provide guidance on flight skills to Zhongqiu. Firebolt? What is that? Chaser Chambers asked with some confusion. The name sounds so familiar. It sounds like a broomstick. The Firebolt is the fastest broomstick on the market today. It is the latest product of the Nimbus Racing Broom Company and represents the highest level of technology at present. Roger explained in a serious tone, it can be used within 10 seconds. It accelerates from standstill to 150 miles per hour in seconds. It also has a magical braking function and can automatically hover at the appropriate height. I heard that the Irish team plans to use it as a competition broomstick. Potter's previous Nimbus 2000 was destroyed by the Whomping Willow during the match against Hufflepuff. Zhongqiu sighed with an indifferent expression. This can be considered a blessing in disguise for him. She is not afraid of her opponent's firebolt, even though this broom is praised by so many people, because she has great faith in Yeting's alchemy level. You know, after her broom was modified by Yeting, she even tried to exceed 200 miles per hour, and this was not the limit. The final test had to stop because she could not withstand such high speeds. I heard that the price of a firebolt is several thousand gold galleons. Bradley said incredulously, who would give him such an expensive gift? I'm sure it's not his uncle. Maybe he's an admirer. Harry has a lot of fans. Roger guessed, after all, he defeated the mysterious man. Maybe it's Dumbledore. Zhongqiu proposed a new idea. We all know that Dumbledore is partial to Harry. He even gave Harry an invisibility cloak. It's not Dumbledore. Yeting shook his head and explained, the invisibility cloak is a relic of Harry's father, but it was kept by Dumbledore. No matter how partial Dumbledore was to his savior, he would never do such a thing. You guys don't guess, I dare say, you will never guess who gave this firebolt. That is a quite unexpected person. Finally, Roger concluded, no matter what, we must pay attention to Gryffindor anyway. Zhongqiu performed quite well in the previous games, but when facing Harry Potter, he still has to do his best. Go! Harry was already a great flyer, but now that you have the firebolt, your advantage on the broomstick is gone, so you must train hard during this period, otherwise we may lose to Gryffindor. I will train hard, Zhongqiu replied, with pride in his tone, but I don't think I have no advantage when facing the savior, whether in skills or on the broomstick. After saying that, she turned around and gave Yeting a big smile. Soon, however, the direction of the wind changed. This firebolt was temporarily detained by Professor McGonagall. Since Harry has been under the threat of Black this school year, the professors suspected that it was a gift from Sirius Black. They were afraid that the firebolt had been cast with black magic. It is possible for Harry to die unexpectedly, for example, letting Harry fall while flying. Finally, the professors decided to dismantle the broom and check it to see if there were any dangerous black magic spells attached to it. Many people are happy about this. I hope Harry Potter doesn't get that broom back before the Quidditch match is over, at least not before Gryffindor plays us. Otherwise, we're very likely to lose. Competition. Roger sighed and said. Although Zhongqiu himself was full of confidence, he was still very worried. He didn't think Yeting's modified flying broomstick could surpass the firebolt, nor did he think Zhongqiu's flight skills could surpass Harry Potter. As for Slytherin 4.4, their chaser Draco Malfoy even viciously hoped that the broomstick could not be put back together after being disassembled. When he heard that Harry got the firebolt, he was extremely jealous of Harry. He even wrote to Lucius Malfoy and asked Lucius Malfoy to buy him a firebolt, even 7 firebolts. The Slytherin Quidditch team can each get a handful. Unfortunately, although the Malfoy family is an established pure-blood family, it is obvious that they do not have such financial resources. He didn't even buy a firebolt for Malfoy, because the 7 Nimbus 2001 had cost the Malfoy family a lot of money. P.S. A bug just appeared, I'm sorry for posting duplicate chapters. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you are notified of future uploads. You can find the next parts in the playlist visible on the screen or on my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.